Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast. This is episode 128 for Wednesday, November 12th, 2025. My name is Justin Young, and joining me as always is Mario Sanders. Mario, how have you been?
I'm pretty good. Pretty laid back week. I'm heading to a conference next week, so kind of doing all my prepping and all that. But otherwise, yeah, pretty good.
So what are you presenting at this conference? Can you talk about that? Feel comfortable?
Yeah, I'm presenting a paper that I wrote for your class, actually, about video game randomizers.
I didn't know that. That wasn't me with a leading question.
So what are you writing? Oh, is it for me?
Something I had to do with?
Yeah, it's a paper that I wrote for the video games class about randomizers and thinking about how they encourage a particular relationship between the player and the technology. You know, oftentimes video games, the dominant position tends to be one of the hacker mindset of, control over the game and dominance over the game. I'm going to beat the game. And randomizers, while the goal is still to beat them, it purposefully undermines a lot of that mastery and that so
autonomy. Randomizers you're talking about where it takes a game like A Link to the Past and it mixes up where all the items are located.
Exactly. So the one that I had played primarily was Ocarina of Time. And I guess what I talk about with that paper is that it encourages an intimacy and a familiarity with the game that you develop in learning all of these locations and learning a logic in terms of what items you need in order to go to certain places. But at the same time, it undermines a mastery of that knowledge because every iteration is going to be different, right?
Right.
As compared to maybe something like speed running, where you are total control, total dominance over this game, exploiting every ounce of knowledge that you have to beat it as fast as possible. And so I talk about that, and I didn't write about this aspect in the paper for the class, but the next direction that I think it goes is looking at a program like Archipelago that can take all of these individual randomized worlds that people might be playing and link them together. So I might be playing Ocarina of Time, you might be playing Stardew Valley. I'm going to be finding your spinach seeds in my Ocarina game. You're going to be finding my hookshot in Stardew, and via the power of the internet, we're able to send those items back and forth. But I think the important thing about that is the way that then fosters this cooperative community building, really in the sense of, yes, I might have my own little individualized world, but in order to succeed, you need to succeed as well. So that's what I'll be talking about.
So, like I said, I did not know that was actually your presentation for this conference. But yeah, that's really cool. It was a good paper. And
Thank you.
Well, I mean, it was, you wrote it for the class. I read it. It was a good paper. And I think it's a really interesting subject, right? Like something that doesn't get talked about in mainstream game journalism much, which I understand why, right?
Sure.
This is sort of like a niche subset of online gaming, like these randomizers and everything. But I think it's a really interesting, we've talked about it on this podcast before, but like this really interesting way of bringing new life to old games.
Yeah.
Like when you think about something like Ocarina of Time, which I haven't gone back in years and played through that game, which I keep thinking I should. I love that game when it first came out. Like, and it still holds a special place for me. But like this idea of going back and being able to experience that game, almost entirely fresh each new time that I play it is something very appealing for people who have that game that they keep coming back to over and over again. I think I've talked about on this podcast before that, Castlevania Symphony of the Night is one of those for me. Every few years I replay that game. Usually I've forgotten at least some of it because it's been a few years, but I could imagine the appeal of, okay, well, I can just turn around and restart that game and it's an entirely new experience.
Yep.
And, like I kind of, well, this isn't that bizarre or far off from the popularity of roguelikes today.
In many ways, like that's kind of the genre that I tend to put a lot of these randomizers in, is that it turns Ocarina of Time into a roguelike, where you are, starting at a particular location, and as you're finding these items, yes, you're going to find the same items every single time, but the order in which you're doing things might be different, because, if you've got the hook shot and the bow and arrow, okay, well, where am I supposed to go? Okay, as you develop that knowledge, like, okay, the game is telling me to go to the forest temple.
Right.
And so it's figuring out that puzzle. And so that's what I mean in terms of that familiarity with the game of, I've got certain items, where is the game directing me to go? So it's really, in many ways, like listening to, in some ways, what the game wants you to do as well. So yeah, and I don't think that, this is a topic that's been written about a ton. I think part of that is it's a little bit more niche, but part of me also wonders if it's not talked about because it really requires like delving into things like emulation and the murkiness of all of that. Like, unless you're doing everything on Steam, where you can get a lot of these like mod communities are pretty common. When you get to a lot of those retro games, the Super Nintendo games, the Game Boy games, the Nintendo 64 games, you're getting into, like I said, those murky waters of emulation.
Yeah, and that is an area that a lot of mainstream game journalism has shied away from, for reasons I understand, right? Like, they don't want to cross Nintendo and make them upset. But at the same time, we've gotten to a point where I still remember when streamers tried to hide the fact that they were using emulators. And, particularly more mainstream games journalists, like, from your big sites, your GameSpot or IGN or something. Yeah. They would try to hide the fact, and they would be like, no, we are playing this Nintendo 64 that's hooked up to our streaming kit. Instead of, we are running an emulator to play this Nintendo 64 game. So, explaining how to do that, right? How to modify a game, how to run it through this, particular software. Maybe you have to have a modified version of the ROM. That's such a sketchy area when it comes to relations to those companies. Yeah. I don't think it's that sketchy when it comes to actually doing it from a moral perspective, because you are playing the game you are playing a version of the game that is impossible to play otherwise. Yeah. Right? Like, on Nintendo Switch Online, I cannot play a randomized version of Ocarina of Time. Yeah. Though I can play Ocarina of Time. So, I think there is entirely value there, and probably needs to be talked about more, but until Nintendo gets a little less sue-happy, maybe that doesn't happen. Yeah. And I just think about, yes, it's definitely niche, but if you go onto, there's this website that lists all of the randomizers, there are so many different games that exist in there. And like, do you know the URL of that site? I don't. Okay. Never mind. Go ahead. But it's just like it ranges from Atari 2600 games to Elden Ring that you can run through these randomization, mods or these programs. In the older games, it is just patching the ROM, whereas with the newer games, it's the same way you would do the modding for, Stardew Valley or anything like that. But like the style, the kind of games, the familiarity with the games, the age of the games, like, it's so wide ranging that there are like hundreds of games that are have these randomization mods for. And it's interesting you talking about Zelda, because Zelda is one of the first games a lot of people have experience with that essentially already has a randomized second version of the game built in. So like the Master Quest in Zelda games traditionally has basically been a remixed version, right? So you play through the original Legend of Zelda, and then you play through the Master Quest, the second version, it is already remixed. Items are in different locations, you know, dungeons are in different locations, enemies are in slightly different locations. And so like that's already doing a lot of the sort of work of this. And so it is not crazy that grew out of those sorts of games and those sorts of experiences.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the most popular is the Pokemon randomizers, which essentially randomizes the locations that you can find different Pokemon. You know, typically, okay, this Pokemon is always in this location of the game. Well, what if you could instead find any potential Pokemon could be there? That changes the way that you play. It changes like how your teams are able to be built, and so
which team you're going to main because you're getting this Pokemon so much earlier. You're going to build them up,
and so yeah. Like I think they're really fascinating. I mean, I think they're really fascinating because I enjoy playing them so much. I've played randomizers for a lot of different things. Ocarina is probably my favorite, but I've played the Donkey Kong 64 randomizer. I've played the Aria of Sorrow randomizer. Obviously, I've played a number of Pokemon randomizers, and I really enjoy playing them, and so I think that they're worth looking into and worth talking about.
Yeah.
And so while this is like likely very preliminary research that's being done in this area, I would love if other people, like, I don't know if people necessarily find my specific research all that interesting, but I'd love if they just found the concept of randomizers interesting and wanted to look into them for themselves and take their own approach and angle and how they're going to research them.
Yeah, and I think that gets into the very interesting part of the game sort of culture of moving beyond games as art artifacts, right? As simply pieces of art, but getting into, okay, well, what is the culture sort of surrounding this?
Yeah.
Like, how do the consumers of video games interface with these games, right? How do they build a culture surrounding it? Once you move beyond the sort of discussion that we do a lot of times on, you know, weekly basis on this podcast of, do I like this game? Do I not like this game? And we move into that territory of, okay, well, where does culture go then? How do we keep these games relevant, right? So that they don't slip into obscurity. You know, if you look at the history of film, everybody loves to talk about the history of film, and they love to talk about like, oh, well, you know, the Maltese Falcon and Casablanca. And it's like, yeah, but what about all the other movies from that era that nobody ever talks about?
Yeah.
Because they've just been basically lost to time, right? Like maybe they're even available on DVD or on a streaming service, but nobody talks about them unless you're a diehard film buff or you're studying that particular era or something. Video games haven't necessarily suffered that same fate. Now, there are certainly video games that are obscure and have sort of disappeared, but like in some ways, video games, the culture surrounding it, through resources like this, through speed running, through randomizers and things, keep these older games relevant today. So you see something like Super Metroid, which, you know, a pretty old game at this point.
Yeah.
And still seems relevant in the gaming culture because people are, you know, doing randomizers of it. They're still doing speed runs of it. You know, I feel like at the Games Done Quick events, like Super Metroid pops up at least once a year.
Yeah.
At one of those.
Yep. That's one of their big like recurring games that always seems to happen.
And, you know, yes, that's one of the all-time great video games, but also it's still relevant because of that culture.
Yeah, I mean, that's a game that probably came out in the early 90s would be my assumption, maybe the mid 90s. But like that's a game today where like an 18-year-old would never purposely like go find that game unless they were the most diehard video game fan. But now, like even like more fringe people who are fans of video games probably are familiar with that game or they've heard of it and like are going to be encouraged to check it out. And I think that is part of the legacy of video games that needs to, that's one of those ways that that legacy gets perpetuated.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely, like, anytime people start talking about like the sort of culture around video games and like, understand there's a lot of negative stuff about the culture surrounding video games.
Sure.
And the people who populate that culture at times. But the flip side to that is, you know, every time I see people doing cosplay, every time I see people doing web comics, every time I see people doing randomizers and speed running and all this, I look at it and go, this game from 40 years ago is still getting talked about. Mm-hmm. And how many films from 40 years ago is that true of, right? Or, you know, songs from 40 years ago. And yeah, you know, that stuff does. But, you know, it is often because it is still relevant in the culture in some way. Mm-hmm. You know, and there's lots of films I remember from 40 years ago as a kid that I watched, and I'm like, nobody ever talks about this movie. It might as well not exist. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't seem to happen as much with games because of that culture. Yeah. And, you know, like for everything that's said negative about emulation, and trust me, like, you know, I think there are some problems with, you know, emulation at times, but like the great value of emulation is help the history of video games alive, and not just alive, but thriving and relevant in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So cool. Good luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
At the conference and everything. Like I said, I think that's a really interesting topic. I think you wrote a really good paper. I think that will be accepted well by an audience at a academic conference.
Yeah, and it's the game studies group. So like they'll hopefully already be entering somewhat on board with what I'm here to talk about.
I don't know. It's like people who don't go to academic conferences maybe don't understand, like, academic conferences can either be the most supportive place in the world, or they can be like, you know, everybody with their knives out going for somebody. And it can vary depending on like different sessions that you go into. Because I have definitely been in sessions before where everybody's like kumbaya, patting each other on the back. Like, we are supportive. We like, oh, this is fascinating. Tell us more. And, you know, the Q&A part, it becomes a very much like, please tell us more. Like, let's talk about this. We're all very interested. And then there's the ones where almost immediately everybody has their knives out and it's like going at each other. And you're like, what is happening here?
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. I think it'll be fine. I'm not that worried about it, but
I don't think the games culture doesn't seem to be as bad about that as maybe some other areas.
Some others. Yeah, sure.
I will say
they will remain nameless.
Wow.
Or not.
I will say that the film areas sometimes can be pretty brutal, but games areas tend to be much more supportive. I think mostly because everybody feels like nobody takes us seriously. Come on,
we're all on the same team here. We gotta rally together. If we're fighting each other, we'll never get taken seriously.
Right. So yeah, that should be cool. Let's see. Yeah, not a whole lot new with me. We were talking before we went on the air that I saw the new Predator film, Predator Badlands. I love the original Predator film, the Arnold Schwarzenegger 1980s film. I think that film is a action movie classic. It is incredibly stupid. It's one of those films that when you watch it as a kid, you're pretty aware that it's a dumb film. But then as you watch it as an adult, you're like, man, this is even dumber than I remember it being. Like, you know, there are shots in that film of people just like flexing their biceps just to show them flexing their biceps. It's like when I had a colleague one time went to see one of the Fast and Furious films with her husband and son. And the next day at work, she said, there was a point in that movie where like the whole film stopped and for like 10 minutes, girls just danced around in like skimpy shorts. And I said, that's a Fast and Furious film. She said, is that in every one of them? I said, absolutely. So like, I feel like sometimes movies are just really dumb and they just wear that on their sleeve. The original Predator very much does that. Dan Trachtenberg, the director of this film, actually sort of, I guess, like breathed new life into the franchise a few years ago. He did a film called Prey that went straight to streaming on Hulu. That film is set in, I guess, like the late 1800s with a Native American Comanche tribe, and the Predator is basically, in some ways, a remake of the original. The Predator comes down, but it's set in a very different time period. So they're using bows and arrows and staffs instead of using machine guns, Gatling guns, and stuff like they do in the original Predator. And that is a very sort of kind of serious remake of the original. It's still a goofy action movie in a lot of ways, but it's trying to take it seriously. This new one, Badlands, that's playing in theaters and was the #1 film this weekend, is a much more kind of goofy approach to it. And there is some serious pathos in the film with the characters. But it takes the Predator and turns it into the protagonist of the story. So you are rooting for the Predator. This Predator is sort of the runt of the tribe. And so you get sort of cast out of the tribe in the opening moments of the film, and is trying to prove itself by going to this planet where everything is trying to kill it constantly. Like the trees are alive, the plants are alive. This isn't a spoiler, but like one of the first things it encounters, it starts to walk through a field of grass, and it realizes that all the grass is basically razor sharp. So like literally everything on this planet is trying to kill it. And it becomes this sort of buddy film. And I hesitate to say buddy comedy. There is comedy in the film, but this isn't quite the over the top Marvel sort of everything is a joke. Like we're constantly cracking jokes about everything. It does take moments seriously. It does try to establish a relationship and why you should care about these different characters. Elle Fanning is in the film. She's pretty fantastic in this movie. I feel like she's had an amazing past year because she's in this film. She was in the Bob Dylan film that came out last fall, and that was a big, Oscar buzz. I don't know if she got nominated for an Oscar, but there was at least buzz that she might at one point. And then she was also in Death Stranding 2 this summer, to relate it back to video games.
That's where I know I've seen her recently.
Yeah. So she's had a very diverse and interesting last year. So like good for her. And I feel like this film will help elevate her even more into, from child actress into adult leading lady, where you feel like you could build a film around her.
Sure.
And, I think I told you earlier that I would not be shocked if Marvel and DC come, calling for her, if they have not already.
Yeah.
Maybe they already have pitched or something. But this seems like the sort of situation after this where they will be beating down her door to see who can sign her up quicker.
Sure.
And maybe she has no interest. Maybe she's one of those actors.
Who knows?
But you sort of feel like everybody eventually ends up in a Marvel or DC film, whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, Predator Badlands, very entertaining film. Even if you don't like the original, this is PG-13, so it's not R-rated. So some of the gore is certainly toned down significantly. But it's just a really entertaining film and, just a lot of fun. So I would recommend it to most people. I had somebody the other day tell me, I don't like horror films. I'm like, this is not a horror film by any stretch. This is, dumb action adventure buddy film. And, maybe not as dumb as it comes off initially.
Yeah. When we were talking about it earlier, I had asked because we had talked about it. It was last week or 2 weeks ago, maybe. And I didn't have much of an intention of seeing it, but I don't know if I'll see it in theaters, but whenever it comes to streaming, I'm definitely more inclined to check it out now.
Yeah. And it's the sort of thing that, hey, we will probably get a new Predator video game out of this being super successful. So it can't be worse than some of the Predator video games that have been made in the past. All right, let's move on into what we've been playing. Mario, what have you been playing lately?
Yeah, so I've played a slew of Super Nintendo games in the past couple of years. I've talked about a friend who does an event every November, and he puts together a list of games. This year's list are all Super Nintendo games. So thus far, I've played Super Mario World, Donkey Kong Country, Kirby's Dream Course, Spanky's Quest, and that might be it.
Spanky's Quest?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I know what Spanky's Quest is.
Spanky's Quest? Oh, boy. Spanky's Quest is a Super Nintendo game. It was also on the original Game Boy. You play as a little monkey, and you toss these balls up in the air. You bounce them on your head, and eventually there are 4 stages, and then you can pop the balls, and when you pop the balls, out come different sports balls, and you use those to destroy your enemies, who are all fruits.
Okay. So is this like an action platformer?
Yeah,
or is
basically.
Okay, so this isn't a puzzle game of some kind.
Not really. I think it'd be a stretch to call it a puzzle game.
Well, I mean, I'm just asking. The way you just described that almost sounds like, like some sort of single screen puzzle game.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, it's definitely more of a platformer.
Okay.
You're collecting keys through the levels, and you have to collect a certain number of keys to unlock the door at the end of the stage.
I assume this is probably a game I have seen the cover art at some point and just like completely wiped it from my mind because I was like, what the hell is that?
Probably. Yeah, it's probably you've seen that, or you've even seen gameplay of it, but you're like, I don't know what it is. It's a weird game. It's
Speaking of games that disappear from memory, nobody talks about anymore. This is interesting because you are doing exactly what we talked about, right?
It's one of those games that I think it's a game that's very cool, but I think it's one of those games that's like classic Super Nintendo hard, where it's just like it can be so punishing and very demoralizing, like taking damage and then having to restart at the beginning of the world that you're at.
Lion King sort of frustration.
Yeah. So I think those are the only ones I've played thus far, but the others that are on the list are Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse.
Okay.
Tiny Toons, Buster Busts Loose.
Classic.
Nigel Mansell's, so like a indie racing game.
Okay.
Joe and Mac.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one is always an elite game. So it's a little bit more to do. And so one of them is so this friend always his speed running game was Goof Troop. So it's essentially you have to hit a particular threshold in speed running Goof Troop or Chrono Trigger 100%.
Oh, okay.
So I will I'd love to do both of them. I've played Goof Troop normally. I've only played a very little bit of Chrono Trigger though. And so I think that's one where my hope is to finish, if I can get through all of the other games by the time Thanksgiving break starts, then I can play Chrono Trigger over Thanksgiving break.
Okay.
I think is my goal. I just remember there's one other one is Yoshi's Cookie, which I played and beat the other day.
Buster Bust Loose is, I think, one of those games that sort of got overlooked at the time largely, and people have kind of come back around to and been like, wait, this is maybe one of the better platformers on the system. So, at least people I know feel that way about the game. And so that seems like a very good one. Joe and Mac is a very good looking game that is maybe not that good of a game, maybe not that deep of gameplay.
I was watching a friend play it the other day. He was very frustrated playing that game. Maybe has not aged as well. Or I think maybe a better description is the fact that it was also an arcade game.
Yes.
And you can tell that this was a game that was made to eat quarters.
Yeah, I mean, Joe and Mac was one of those games that looked great on the back of a box. And so I feel like it's the sort of game that sold a lot of copies and got a whole lot of rentals because you looked at the back of the box and you're like, man, look at those dinosaurs. Those dinosaurs are huge on screen. And, or maybe you were familiar with the arcade cabinet, seeing it out. And when you actually play the game, you're like, okay, this is really cool for the first level or two. And then, this just keeps going, doesn't it? But you talking about those games being like incredibly hard, that's of the era that games were made really especially hard because of rentals. So, even when they brought a lot of arcade games home, they would make them more difficult than they were in the arcade because they didn't want people blowing through the game in a single rental. They wanted you to rent the game and then maybe buy it. Right? They didn't want you to be able to beat it in 2 or 3 hours. Yeah, that is Spanky is sort of the generic looking character that you're just used to from video games of that era. Yeah. The generic sort of animal mascot style character.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of those games are incredibly artificially difficult of that era. And you go back and you play them and you're like, man, why are these games, they're just mean. Yeah. Like they're not even fun. Like it's not even like challenging. I know a lot of times when I play modern games of that style, that will be like sort of a throwback to that era. I'm like, man, I'm really good at this game. And I realize, oh no, this game is balanced for modern players. It's not balanced because it hates the people playing it and it's trying to get $50 out of them. It's like, it's already sold me for $15 or $20. It's made its money. It doesn't care.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, this friend does this event every November, and it's one that I've, since the beginning, I think the first one that he did was in 2019, but it was a solo event of him just streaming all these games leading up to his birthday. And then he made it a challenge that he opened it up to other people. And so since then, I've always completed the list and would like to be able to do it again this year. Yeah. And so about halfway through. And yeah, should be good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sounds really a lot of fun.
Yeah.
When you do those. Cool. Anything else?
Nope, that's about it.
All right. Last week I talked about Recreation. I did play some more of that. They did do an update to that game to address some of the problems people have been having from a technical end of it. I still think that game's a lot of fun. I don't have anything really big or new to say about it, so I'll just update and say I am continuing to play some of it here and there. I still think it's a lot of fun. I still think that game is probably for a very particular audience. So I have difficulty recommending it to the general public. If you want to play a game like that to see if it's for you, I would highly, highly recommend that Burnout Paradise remaster they did a few years ago. That is commonly on sale for $5 or so on various platforms. So I would say check that out. And if you love that and wanting something similar to that recaptures a lot of that, then check out Recreation. But new things that I played. So after our discussion last week, and I don't know, did we discuss this on the podcast or is this off air? We talked about Fortnite.
Couldn't even tell you.
We talked about Fortnite last week, and maybe it was off air, maybe it was actually on air. They finally got me. They finally got me to install Fortnite. So it was basically a two-prong attack against me. One was they
think it was off air. I think we talked about it off air.
So it was basically a two-pronged attack. They have done this Simpsons season for it. So they have taken the island and transformed it into the city of Springfield. Mm-hmm. So they have the Simpsons house and Flanders house, but they also have Moe's Bar and the nuclear station. They have Camp Krusty and all these like famous locations, you know, over the past 40 years of that show. So that's all in the game and everything. And it's a really good recreation of that. So that was part of what got me in. And at the same time, there's a special limited game that they're doing to celebrate Disneyland's 70th anniversary. So I'll just talk about both of these kind of briefly. Fortnite is what probably most people have already played, already know. Like, I'm not going to explain what Fortnite is. I think everybody's familiar with it. The biggest game in the world. Let me explain it to you. Let me explain to you what this game is. Have you heard of Tetris?
Have you heard of Fortnite?
So there's 100 characters on a bus. Jump out of a plane.
First, you thank the bus driver.
Right. So anyways, you know, that game is very accessible. It plays very easy. Not that, you know, to win is easy, but I think it's a very easy game to pick up and play. Mm-hmm. I think they've streamlined a lot of the issues that, you know, looking back at games that I have spent time with and have played battle royales like PUBG, mm-hmm. Certainly in its early days were much more of a hump to get over, mm-hmm. to get into. And so this is very streamlined. I think it plays well. I think the Simpsons sort of overlay of it and everything is a lot of fun. The bigger of a Simpsons fan you are, the more that's going to pay off. For somebody like me who's looking at it going, oh, look, that's a reference to this episode. That's a good joke and everything. That was the whole thing that got me into it.
It's probably one of those things where it's like, I don't even want to maybe even play Fortnite. I just want to be able to walk around.
No, exactly. Yeah. And in fact, if I have a big criticism is exactly that. Like, I was much more interested in like exploring that world.
Yeah.
Like, that's the game I want to play.
Yeah. If you made this a walking simulator version of Fortnite.
Well, you know, even they did that Simpsons Hit and Run, which was basically a Grand Theft Auto clone using the Simpsons, right? Mm-hmm. And people for years have asked for a remake of that game, which might tie into our later question. But like, when you look at something like that, you know, that's a fun game, but like part of the appeal is you get to explore Springfield.
Yeah.
In the same way that I think part of the appeal of Hogwarts Legacy is you get to explore a pretty faithful recreation of Hogwarts.
Yeah. And like all the nooks and crannies that don't always get shown, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Where they're filling in the gaps, right? Like, where is this, you know, Simpsons plays fast and loose with it much more than Harry Potter. Yeah. You know, whether, you know, this week they're next door to a mall or something, and next week that doesn't exist. So, you know, the fact that they're trying to build this into a believable world and like populating it with the characters and the references and the signage and things that you've come to expect of The Simpsons, that's all fantastic. It's fantastic world building. They do a really good job with that. But you're still playing Fortnite on top of it.
Yeah.
And, you know, like that's good. And I revisiting that style of game, I'm totally sold on why so many people spend time with it, but it's not a game I'm going to spend, you know, 20 hours a week with.
Sure.
So, you know, I think it's worth checking out. If you are a Simpsons fan, obviously Fortnite's free. Like, you know, you can jump right into this. It's not hard. I will say the one thing that sort of got me playing both of these games was there are still like headaches of navigating the sort of user interface that if you're not already familiar with it, I could see somebody loading this up today for the first time and just being overwhelmed because there's so many options.
Sure.
Now. You know, it's not like when Fortnite first launched and there was like, you know, I guess 2 options. There was the Survive the Night and the Battle Royale game. There's so many different choices and options, and it just sort of overwhelms you. It feels very much like a mobile game, which I guess it is. But when you first boot it up now, it feels like, hey, do you want to get this battle pass? So, hey, we've given you these items. Hey, we've done this. Hey, you should check this out. And you're just like, oh my God, I just want to play the game.
Yeah.
So, thumbs up to the Simpsons overlay. The second thing I checked out is their Disneyland 70th anniversary. So this is an entirely separate game in the way that the Lego Fortnite and different things like that are. You have to like search it out and try this. And this is basically a collection of mini games. So it loads you into a hub that sort of looks like Disney World or Disneyland, and you can run around and collect Disneyland tokens that you can buy cosmetics with and everything from a store in there. There are trivia questions you can run up and answer, and they will give you some of those tokens so you can buy the cosmetic items. I bought some Stitch ears, so my character was walking around with little Stitch ears on. But the actual gameplay part beyond that is it will randomly like run you through a series of mini games. Those mini games are built around different Disney properties. So one of them is Star Wars. So you're like on a Star Destroyer running around shooting stormtroopers. One of them is the Haunted Mansion. So you're running through the Haunted Mansion trying to collect items. I will say the best part, and this is made the best part of any of the mini games, is it starts off by putting you in the what is it, like an octagon, the room at the beginning where the walls start stretching up high on you and everything. It runs you through that before you actually do anything else. There's a Space Mountain level, and I'm forgetting the other one. But those are all terrible. They're terrible mini games. They're like, you play them once and you're like, okay, I get it. I never want to play any of these again. I can't imagine why anybody would want to play them again unless you just had no access to any other video game, right? Like Fortnite Battle Royale is a substantially better game than any of these mini games are. And so I guess I get, like, there were people playing it. It got me to download, install, and play it. So, like, I get the value of making something like this. But it's such a turnoff for me that if I was a diehard Disney fan, I might install this, play this, and then, 5 minutes later, uninstall the whole thing. So I don't know what the value there is. Maybe because it just is something different, and you're trying to keep those diehard Fortnite players within this environment, right? Within the sort of meta game of Fortnite, where they're buying cosmetics and skins for different characters. You're selling them, obviously, the Disney cosmetics and everything. Maybe that's the value, but it's just so bad. It's so, like, just not, like, I wouldn't call any of those mini games fun. They're just so simplistic and almost like turn your brain off and automatically just run through them. Comparing this to something like the Walt Disney World adventure game on the NES, which is a bad game, but the mini games in that game are better than the mini games in this Fortnite game.
Yeah, that's not a great sign.
No, it's really disappointing. So anyways, I would recommend The Simpsons. If you are a Simpsons fan, it's kind of neat just to run around in that environment and see it. Like I said, I wish, and I know there are ways to do this, but like I wish it was easier to just say, I want to explore the environment on my own. Like, I don't care if I get any rewards or anything. I just want to walk around and like see this world you've created.
Yeah.
I wish that was easier to do, but I think it's worthwhile. And that game, if you have not installed and played it before, it starts you off playing bots. So it is, maybe this is just common. I would assume so. I won the first game I played.
Yeah.
Because easy with the bots. And again, I don't play a lot of competitive, shooters like that. So anyways, that's about that. Second game here is a mobile game called Solitaire Association's Journey. So this is a kind of a weird one. It's a solitaire game, but instead of using suits of cards, you are using items that belong in a category together. So it is like the New York Times game Connections. Yes. So you might, instead of an ace, you will have a card that is the grouping. So you might have one that's like myth. And then all the cards that go under that will be like Zeus and Atlas and things of that nature. And then you are playing solitaire. So you can only stack items that belong in the same group together, right? Instead of things of the same suit. And it is not as hard as Connections, because Connections can be like incredibly obscure at times in ways that are frustrating. I haven't found any of the categories to be that frustrating, but when you are first starting up a new game and you see like something like Atlas, there might also be a category that's like map. And you might think, oh, well, Atlas goes under map, and you try to put it under there and it rejects it. And you're like, wait, what does Atlas go under then? And so there is some of that, which I think makes it challenging and interesting when you're like starting out playing a level. It's never like, again, as hard as Connection, but it can be like, it's a pretty good solitaire game. It can be challenging. I don't win automatically every time.
And what are you playing this on?
So I'm playing it on the iPad.
Okay.
It is on iOS. I'm not sure if it's available on Android. I would imagine. It seems like it would be. But it's a fun little game.
Cool.
So if you're looking for a mobile game that's going to, play a version of Solitaire that's a little bit more challenging and everything, I think this does a really good job of that. If you like Connections, this is a way to play something similar, but maybe not as like infuriating as that game can be at times.
Well, and I know we've talked about in the past that those little puzzle games, I've got 10 minutes, I can kill some time with this, or a way to use your brain in a different way. Those are always nice to have available to you.
Sort of detox your brain after you're doing something particularly intensive work-wise. Yeah. And then the last thing I played is Lumines Arise. So this is from the Tetris Effect people. They have, who are the original Luminous people. So now they have made a new version of Luminous that takes the Tetris Effect formula and applies it to Luminous, which is a little weird because Luminous always was sort of that Tetris Effect formula as far as really making it into an audio-visual experience as much of it as a game. So if you're not familiar with Luminous, like I believe the first one came out on PSP. That's the first time I played it. Over the years, the versions have been released on Xbox 360 and other platforms. But Luminous is you are making groups of colored blocks. So you have 2x2 blocks that you're dropping, and it might be levels will be 2 colors. So you might have 2 blocks that are black and 2 that are white that make up your little 4-piece block. You are dropping those and trying to line them up so they line up with other blocks of the same color, and you're making larger blocks out of that. And you might think, well, okay, so it's sort of like Tetris, except they don't immediately disappear when you line them up. Instead, there is a line that is constantly moving horizontally across the screen, and it'll go across and then restart at the beginning. And as you build those up, as the line goes across, it sort of triggers them as it reaches those particular blocks that you've built. And so you're trying to set up chains where you'll have a whole lot of, say, the white blocks all lined up, and then it comes across, and as it deletes those, it drops the remaining black ones into place where it'll create a new chain for the next time it comes around. The line comes across the screen. So it is, and that's constant. It's constantly moving and everything. So it is maybe a little bit more active than some puzzle games can be. But the games have always been set to kind of fun soundtracks and different skins on the game. So as you beat so many levels, the color combinations will switch, and you'll switch to a different song and everything. So that's always been a heavy aspect. This takes all that and ratchets it up. If you play Tetris Effect, you sort of know what to expect with it. Lots of visual effects going off in the background, fireworks going off as you're playing, the puzzle board sort of pulsing to the music and everything. And much like with Tetris, that can be a fantastic experience, or it can give you a bleeding headache. And, I think different people are going to have different experiences with that. I think maybe one of the frustrations people might have is that there's too much going on at times, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So if you're really into the game itself, you might be like, well, all this is so distracting. It's sort of bothering me. It's making it difficult for me at times to focus on what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And so I can see that being a frustration. That was a criticism some people had about Tetris Effect. I guess what I would say, it's just a really cool way to play this game. It does have a VR mode. I have not tried the VR mode in it yet. What I've seen is people being very positive about playing this in the VR mode. Tetris Effect was really fantastic playing in VR. But I would say this is a game that is very much about the experience of playing it. Like, it's less about the high score. It's less about getting to a certain level. It is more about relaxing and kind of experiencing this audio visual experience. Similar to something like, say, a Res, or obviously, as we've already talked about, Tetris Effect itself. And I think it's fantastic. I think it's a really fun experience. I like it a lot, but I also love Tetris Effect. Mm-hmm. So, take that for what you will. But if you've never played Lumines before, this is a really great way to get into Lumines. I think it's one of the better puzzle games out there. It's not quite as great as Tetris, but I would say it is at that next step down for me as far as puzzle games. So if you really like Tetris, you want something new, but like similar to that, and you really like Tetris Effect, you like that sort of, almost bombardment from an audio visual perspective, I think this game will be right up your alley. But, again, not for everyone. I feel like I've been saying that a lot about games lately. And, when I look at a lot of these games, I do feel like they're very narrow casted in some cases. I think this game can be experienced by a lot of people. I just like to warn people in advance that maybe there's going to be some things that will turn you off from it. But it is kind of cool to look at games like Recreation and go, hey, this game that's for a very particular audience, it's not for everyone, can actually get made and hopefully be successful today. All right, that does it for what I've been playing. So let's move on into the news. And right before we went into the studio to start recording this, I saw the news and actually came by your office and said, hey, did you see that we're getting a new game console? Steam is launching a new game console. It's not their first time to launch a game console, but everything seems to point to this will be more successful than the last time they tried this. So Steam has just announced a new Steam machine, but not just that, they're launching two other products along with it. A new Steam machine, a Steam controller, and a VR Steam frame headset. All of these will be shipping, according to them, in early 2026. They did not give a specific date for that. And so let's talk about these. So the easiest one to talk about, I think, is the new controller. The new controller looks a bit like a marriage between a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox Series X controller. The joysticks are symmetrical to each other, sort of like on a PlayStation 5 controller. So they're kind of below the D-pad and the buttons like they are on a PlayStation 5 controller. But then below those, they have two trackpads. So similar to as on the Steam Deck and everything. Yeah. So, this is also similar to the original Steam controller, how it had a trackpad on it. So they do have these dual trackpads below that. That is going to come out. One assumes that will come with the Steam box when you buy it. I assume you would be able to connect other controllers via Bluetooth to that. So if you're more comfortable with a PlayStation or Xbox controller, you could actually connect those to the Steam box and play with those. Otherwise, the controller looks pretty standard. There's nothing else, at least that I've seen so far. And again, we are kind of seeing this as it happened. So there doesn't seem to be anything particularly weird about that controller otherwise.
Yeah, I think my only, and this is hard to tell just from pictures, is how bulky it is.
Right.
Because it's like, it looks bulky the way that like the original Xbox controller or like the Dreamcast controller was bulky.
Right.
And so that would be my only concern, but that's one of those things that you kind of just have to actually see it in people's hands and how it gets used, because it might be strictly visual more than actually functionally bulky, if that makes sense.
So you're talking about like the Duke controller for the original Xbox. Yeah. I don't think it's that big. Mm-hmm. But I do get your concern about it being bulky, which I think is a fair concern given that one of the major criticisms of the Steam Deck has been its bulk.
Yeah, because I think, so, the way that it's laid out, I wonder like how much distance there is in the sense of like, am I going to be triggering the trackpad with like the bottom of my thumb or like the whatever part of this, you call this part of your hand, when I'm like on the control sticks. And again, maybe these are, I will say these might not actually be issues at all, but visually this picture that I'm looking at, I could feel like I could see like you accidentally moving or like triggering the trackpad, and is that going to affect something in the game? Maybe it's nothing, but that's my only like really nitpicky like potential criticism of it, or worry of it is not even a criticism because it's not based in anything other than visuals.
Right. And I wonder if that becomes a situation where that is something you can turn off.
True.
On the controller.
True.
Like even if it's not a literal flip or switch on the controller itself, if that's something like within the OS, you can say turn these trackpads off.
Yeah.
Or don't accept input from them until I turn this back on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the controller. Sorry, I am currently scrolling through trying to look at all of this. They do say that it has the thumbsticks have TMR technology. So that is the newest sort of magnetic technologies to hopefully prevent stick drift.
Yeah.
So, this is not a controller that they are skimping on. They seem to be putting in quite a bit of technology into this. They also note that this controller will be able to pair with the VR headset. And so you'll be able to play with that. It'll be able to connect via Wi-Fi. It will have a USB dongle so that you can connect it to your two different devices. Maybe if they don't have Bluetooth, I assume it has Bluetooth, but actually don't see that offhand real quick. Let's see.
Yeah, that's something that feels like should just be a given.
Yeah, dedicated Bluetooth antenna. Yeah, so anyways, the controller looks really kind of simple, straightforward and everything. The other two devices are probably the more interesting ones for most people. So let's talk about the Steam Machine. The Steam Machine is a little black box.
Yeah, basically.
It's a cube. It sort of almost looks like the Mac cube when they put one of those out years and years ago. Though this looks significantly smaller. This looks like something, the sort of size that you could easily put this in a home entertainment system under your television.
It looked like you could easily mistake this for a speaker, right? Like there's not really anything on it. I was going to joke like, oh, they're returning to the best console, the Nintendo GameCube, with, the design choice. But even, it's very sleek.
It is a 6-inch cube.
Okay.
So yeah, it's incredibly small. It does have obviously ports on the back. It has, I believe, some USB ports on the front, so you can plug a controller into it.
I think the only thing that they really marketed is there's like a LED on the front of it that will flash to probably indicate either the power being on, or I think it had said downloads that you can track. But yeah, like I said, it looks very sleek, something that would fit in probably pretty well with most people's entertainment systems.
Yeah, they said it has a 1 gigabit Ethernet, DisplayPort 1.4, and HDMI 2.0. A little surprising that's not 2.1. I'm not sure what the issue of why you use 2.0 instead of the more updated 2.1 on there is. It has 1 USB-C port and 4 USB-A ports. It will come in 512 gigabyte and 2 gigabyte storage options.
2 terabyte.
Oh, yeah, sorry, 2 terabyte.
2 gigabytes. You can fit nothing on it.
Yeah. Look, you have to insert an SD card in order to install the OS. Its power supply will, this is coming from Video Games Chronicle, its power supply will be built in, meaning it won't have a external power brick. Let's see. They are promising it will offer 4K gaming at 60 frames per second.
Yeah, the big marketing that I saw, like at the very top, was 6 times as powerful as the Steam Deck.
Yeah. Which, like the Steam Deck is, it was very powerful at the time it released, but it still wasn't, a gaming PC by any stretch of the imagination.
It's probably like you're on your weakest level of like gaming laptops, or maybe even mid level of gaming laptops, but like your bottom level of like a gaming PC.
Yeah. I mean, I think a Steam Deck nowadays is, maybe slightly below the power of a Switch 2. And so they're saying this is going to be 6 times more powerful than that. Right. So like they're talking about a system significantly more powerful than a Switch 2.
Sure.
That might be the easiest way to make that comparison.
Yeah. I wonder how that would stack up against your modern PlayStation 5 or like your PlayStation 5 Pro. So I assume it would be fairly equivalent to that. Because if this is playing all of your modern games at sort
4K
of
60.
peak resolution.
Right. They're saying this has FSR, so that is the sort of frame generation, technology that NVIDIA and other companies have. So, yeah, I mean, that seems at 4K 60, that puts it equivalent, right? Not just to a PlayStation 5, but really, I would say a PlayStation 5 Pro.
Yeah.
At that point.
And this is faulty logic by, now that I sit and think about it. But I think my initial concern was, what the heck is this thing going to cost? Because I think my thing was 6 times as powerful as a Steam Deck. It's going to be 6 times as expensive as Steam Deck. It's going to be the 2025 Neo Geo, 2026 Neo Geo.
Yeah, but I mean, one of the ways to think about that, right, is that the Steam Deck is inherently limited by a lot of factors, as all handhelds are. Mm-hmm. So you can't produce a handheld that is at max power because it would eat through its battery in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So inherently, they have to ratchet down the power of any handheld. This is why the Switch and the Switch 2 are underpowered, right? If you try to put even if you could, for cost reasons, put a PlayStation 5 into a handheld, it would eat through the battery way too quickly, right? So they have to power that down. So you don't have to worry about that. You also don't have to worry about the heat issues of having a battery in a handheld, right? So this is something that's going to set under a TV. It's going to be cooled that way. It's not going to be in your hand while you're using it. So it can run, certainly more powerful for that reason. You also don't have the cost of a battery. You don't have the cost of a screen.
Yeah.
So, it seems like, oh, well, this is going to be, significantly more expensive. But in truth, this may, especially that lower 512 gigabyte version, might be kind of the equivalent in price to a Steam Deck, would be my guess.
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking it'll probably, maybe the 512, not as much, but I'm thinking somewhere between the Switch and PlayStation 5. Like, I'm thinking probably at least $600 would be my guess.
I would agree with that, except the Steam Deck came in much cheaper than people expected, right? Like, that system was famous for, at the time it came out, it was significantly more powerful than the Switch 1.
Yeah.
And it was not significantly more expensive. Like, you could get the low-end model for, I think, $400 when it launched.
Sure.
And so, like, when I look at something like this, I wonder if they subsidize the cost to some degree because, you will be buying all your games digitally through Steam.
Sure.
Right?
They recoup a ton of the cost through that.
Yeah. And so are they willing to take a cut on that? And I mean, I don't imagine that low-end model sells for any more than $500. I think the low-end model comes in at $500 because that is the price of a PlayStation 5. That's the price of a Switch. That's the price of some model of the Xbox. Who knows at this point because they jacked up those prices so insanely. But like, I would very much expect that low-end model to sell at $500 or maybe potentially even less. Like, if they were to launch that 512 model at $400, then I think this thing flies off the shelf.
Yeah.
And then you have that 2 terabyte model, not 2 gigabyte. You have that 2 terabyte model, right, as the upsell. And that's what you sell at $600 or something. I don't know. We're speculating. They have not released price on this yet.
And it might be one of those things where you sell it at a bit of a loss as a way to, like, get people in the door.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
If you mark this thing initially at $700, $800, like, no, I'm good. But at $400, you might start to tempt people a little bit.
Well, and I think the Steam Deck, right, it has always been sort of a Trojan horse to get people into the Steam ecosystem.
Sure.
Right? Like, they want you buying games through the Steam store instead of buying them, instead of buying that same game on the Switch.
Sure.
So you're going to, that indie, title, that $20 indie title, they want you buying that on the Steam store. And then once they have gotten people accustomed to doing that, right, then the hope is that they'll buy more games. And we've talked about this, like, this is more common today. Like, I think teenagers today are much more likely to have a quote unquote gaming PC than, say, 25 years ago.
Sure.
where that was more of your like diehard enthusiast.
Sure.
But I feel like Steam is still one of those platforms that a lot of people aren't part of, right? There's still like such a large segment of the population that wants a consoleized experience. They want something they can plug into their TV and set under their television. And that's never going to be your Alienware PC for them.
Mm-hmm.
And for Steam, for Valve, making these products, they look at it as, well, how do we get into that market? Because if we can get under that television, we can get them buying games, then they're going to buy a Steam Deck because their games will be portable then on this. And then they'll probably install Steam on their home PC because at least some of the games they can play on that.
Yeah.
Right at that point. Stardew Valley.
Sure.
Right? Like even if you don't have a gaming PC, you can play that level of game on there as well. Even just the sort of integrated Intel graphics that your generic
most basic computers run.
Right. And so I think to me that has to be their motivation in doing all this, right? Is expanding that market. Like they don't really care about taking on Sony as much as they care about when people buy Spider-Man, it's through their store instead of Sony's.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do wonder how those, not so much Nintendo, because again, two totally different worlds.
Sure.
But I do wonder how Xbox, or not Xbox, but Microsoft and Sony, like what their response is to this right now, seeing this news. You know, is it like a, okay, or if there's some scrambling? Because I could see it from both of them in the sense of like, you know, I could see people, myself included, being like, do I need to buy a PlayStation if all of the PlayStation games are coming to Steam nowadays? Yeah, maybe they come to Steam a year later, but like the new God of War is definitely coming to Steam at some point. Do I really need a PlayStation if I can just buy the Steam machine and that's going to play all of my games from now on? You know, and same thing with Xbox. You know, you're putting all your games on PC anyways, so I don't think I know if I really need either of these consoles anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a most direct assault on Xbox. When we talked about it last week about what is the plan for the future Xbox, right? And they talked about it being more of an open system, you know, something that functions more like a PC, but you could install Steam or the Epic Game Store or something else on it. And you look at this and you go, well, this is a system that is going to, you know, run on the Steam OS. So this is running on Linux. This won't be Windows, but it's going to be selling you those Steam games. And you're right. All those Xbox games are being put on Steam. Right. And so this all of a sudden becomes, well, what do I need an Xbox for? Like, why would I not buy this instead of an Xbox? Because there's nothing exclusive to the Xbox at this point.
Yeah.
And so this feels like very much a direct assault against them. Whereas PlayStation, I think that exclusivity period probably buys them something. And certainly not every PlayStation first-party game has come to the PC yet, right? Astro Bot from last year.
Sure.
You know, Gran Turismo. You know, like there are still lots and lots of games that are exclusive to the PlayStation format, even coming out today.
Sure. You figure Ghost of Yotei will almost certainly eventually come to Steam, but not until maybe summer next year at the earliest.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's been the big question about Sony is when do they start cutting those windows of exclusivity?
Yeah. Right, because that's one of those things we talked about with Helldivers being a day and date simultaneous release.
And, you know, they do that for Helldivers because that's a multiplayer only game.
Yeah.
So you want as big of a player base as possible. And we're going to talk about Helldivers a little later coming to the Xbox. But when you look at something like their first party games, right? Like that Wolverine game that they're putting out next year. Well, do you want to wait a year plus to potentially play a PC port of that? I think at some point they do a PC port. Though I do wonder if this makes them start rethinking that a little bit.
Sure.
Because now there's something under the television competing directly against them.
And that's really my thing is, yes, I think you're right in that Microsoft is probably far more worried about what this means for them. But I do think Sony is probably like, well, shit, we've been putting our games on here, like on this platform. Does this potentially incentivize people to just wait around?
Right.
So,
and I think probably the outcome of this is that maybe it makes Sony say, hey, we're going to wait longer, or we're not going to wait less, right? Like, we're going to maybe keep that year plus exclusivity window.
We're going to really disincentivize you making this your permanent swap, or you're making this your only console.
Yeah, you will miss out on something in doing this, or you will be behind all your friends and everything. Like I think this hurts Xbox, but it hurts Xbox from the perspective, we are still thinking very much in the traditional console wars mindset with this. And honestly, I'm not sure Xbox cares. I think maybe Xbox looks at this and says, well, you're still buying our game on Steam. We're still getting our cut.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how much do we care? Like, go buy Forza Horizon on Steam and play it on your Steam machine. We are still getting the 70% whatever cut.
Well, that's I think it just goes back to the, eventual conversation of whether or not Microsoft goes the way of Sega and just turns into a software company.
Well, I think to some degree, Microsoft already is, right? When you talk about the streaming, right?
Sure.
Like that's a software.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's a software solution, right? The fact that they still have a piece of hardware out there with the Xbox name on it. And in the case of the ROG Ally X, right? That's not even hardware that they're making anymore, right? They are making a software solution so that their games will run on that better.
Yeah.
It probably ratchets that up because that competition more. It probably lights more of a fire under Microsoft to make sure that the Windows handheld or Windows under the television box experience is going to be better, right?
Sure.
Because they don't care so much what platform you're playing their game on. Everything's an Xbox, but they do very much care that you're using Windows to do it.
Sure. And that's where that's the big downside of this is this won't be able to at least very cleanly run Game Pass, right?
Right.
I'm sure
or
they're
Epic Game Store.
Yeah. And so we talked about it. It's definitely a big jump from Valve or Steam of just like a really throwing their hat significantly into that ring. Into a ring that, I don't know. I mean, obviously, we've talked about the Switch 2. We've talked about the PlayStation 5 in terms of how well they're selling. So there's definitely, it is a market that is strong, but
sure,
I don't know. It doesn't always feel that way sometimes.
Well, I think the finances of the game industry have been in a major flux over the last couple of years with all the layoffs we've talked about.
It maybe just feels very precarious.
Sure.
Yeah. You could be PlayStation 5 or you could be Xbox right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Or you could be Nintendo out doing your own thing. And Nintendo is the person in the white gown skipping through the daisies going, completely oblivious to what's going on with everyone else. And we love them for it, but
it's that meme of like those two people fighting each other and then the one person in the background just like filming it.
Right.
Like just completely not interested at all.
Right. Just like not part of it, right?
Yeah.
Like Nintendo did the best thing in the world. Nintendo, starting with the Wii, said, hey, we are taking ourselves out of this fight.
Yeah.
And, I, like many people at the time, were like, what are you doing? This is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, they have shown themselves to have been extremely prescient with that. Like they saw that this escalating console war was one that they could not win.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had to design a different battle that they were fighting.
Yeah.
And, the Wii was the first step of that. And then we've seen with the Switch 1 and now we're seeing with the Switch 2, they're being incredibly successful with that. Now, I think at some point, right, like something like the Steam Deck starts to potentially cut into that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have more people in that ecosystem through something like the Steam machine, then maybe Nintendo starts to feel a little bit more pressure. But, this last console generation, I feel like Nintendo felt no pressure from Sony and Microsoft. And, starting off with the Switch 2, obviously we've talked about, fastest selling console ever. They're still not feeling any of that pressure, it feels like.
Yeah. And I think, they will just always have their software to fall back on, right? Like you need us if you want to play these games.
Yeah.
And
if you want to play Mario Odyssey, there is nowhere else to play. If you want to play Pokemon ZA, there's nowhere else to play.
it feels like we'll call your bluff. If you think if you're fine not playing our games, that's fine. You don't need to buy our thing. But if you want to play these games, this is the only place you can get them.
And you will pay the full sticker price on these games because we are never discounting them.
Yeah, 7 years from now, enjoy your $70 game, sucker. You want your $5 95% off sale? Yeah, go over there.
I think I did put it in the group chat that they did announce the games that they're selling discounted for Black Friday.
Yeah.
And, it's like 5 games, but it's not the game that you want in a lot of cases. So like it's one of the Kirby games, but it's not Kirby in the Forgotten Land, right? It's like one of the, for lack of a better term, the lesser Kirbys.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's funny. Super Mario Odyssey was one of those games. It's like, oh, a gift from Nintendo. You let me buy your 9-year-old game at $30.
Right. Our game, which we cannot monetize anymore at this point, but we're going to still sell it at, like a brand new indie title price.
Yeah. Yeah, there were. I was looking at it, and your newest game on this list is Echoes of Wisdom, which came out just last year.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing Luigi's Mansion 3, and then I saw somebody post about it. I was like, wait, that game is 5 years old? That doesn't sound right.
Yeah, like it's at least 5 years.
4 years, maybe. I don't know, but a game is a lot older than I feel like it should be.
Yeah, I mean, there's speculation that a Luigi's Mansion 4 will be announced soon.
Sure.
It's been out that long.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a fantastic game at $30.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, while we're talking about it, like, and Mario Odyssey, but I feel like you've already played Mario Odyssey if you want to play Mario Odyssey.
Yeah. I feel like if you're like, oh, now's my time to get in. Like, one, props to you for having that level of like discipline of like, I will not spend $70 on Mario Odyssey.
Yeah, you're really playing the long game. Yeah. You're going to get Nintendo.
You did win. I'll give you that.
Yeah, so like, I don't know, like this thing being so small and so convenient, like, we were talking about it before we went on there. And one of the things I said to you is like, right now, if you go in my living room, my house, my Switch and my PlayStation and my Xbox are all connected to that TV. In part because that's where I like to play games, but also when people come over.
Sure.
Right? If somebody wants to see a game, and sometimes people come over and they're like, oh, you got the Switch too? Can I see it? Like, or we want to play a multiplayer game.
Mm-hmm.
But something like this, the sort of multiplayer games, if I want to play Overcooked,
Yeah.
right? Like this makes a whole lot of sense as, okay, I buy this, I put this under my television, I play Overcooked, I play, Garfield Kart 2 with Christina. But like, with friends, with people coming over, with family, it's small enough too, it's easy to pack up in a suitcase, take home for the holidays.
I also think about, if there's ever, I mean, this is kind of following that same line. If we were to ever do another playing for pets, right? Like how simple that makes so much of the setup.
Right. And, I do have a gaming PC here in my office that's, much easier than having to go get mine at home. But yeah, I mean, like that's the sort of thing that, like you even start looking at depending on the price, right? Like, is this a department purchase, right? Like, I don't know this department, but like I could see departments saying like, hey, we should buy one of these and we can have this for events when we want to do stuff, when we want to have a get together night, and have people kind of associate.
Absolutely.
And well, I was about to say, like the Jackbox sort of games, you can run those off a laptop, but I feel like for a lot of people, when they see this style of game, the sort of games that we play at something like Playing for Pets, they start going, oh, wow, like I didn't know these sorts of games existed.
Sure.
Right? That I can just sit down and I don't have to have a lot of knowledge. I don't have to be very good, and I can have a whole lot of fun playing this.
Yeah. And the fact that this will have access to all of them.
Right.
I could see in that sense, especially if it does sell at somewhere between $400, $500.
Right.
If those are the games you're playing, you only need 512 gigabytes, right? You don't need a 2 terabyte thing for those types of smaller party games.
Yeah, because you can swap them out. I mean, you can uninstall and install a new one.
Yeah. But like the more casual gamer, like that makes so much sense.
And this is beyond enough power to run that style of game.
Yeah.
And I mean, so what I was saying to you is like, does this mean my PlayStation, my Xbox get moved into my office where my gaming PC is, right? Is that where they will live going forward? Because that style of casual game is covered by something like this and the Switch.
Yeah.
So if I want those Nintendo specific games, if I want my Kirby Air Ride, right? If I want to play that, I will still need a Switch hooked up. But, like, why would my PlayStation and Xbox be out in the living room at that point, right? That gets moved into a different part of the house. And I think that will be true. I know some people will say, well, you're talking about buying a whole nother console just for that convenience. But I feel like a lot of people are in that situation of, we have one PlayStation 5, but my kids want to play it, or my wife wants to play it while I'm watching TV or something. And okay, well, do we need to buy a second PlayStation 5? And I think for a lot of people, maybe this becomes that replacement. You don't buy a second PlayStation 5.
Yeah.
You don't buy a second Xbox. You buy this, and then that thing, that Xbox, that PlayStation goes into a different part of the house, the kid's bedroom, somewhere else different. So yeah, I can entirely see that with this. And I think the price point will be a huge determining factor for
Sure, absolutely.
Let's see. There's some more details here about the system. We're not going to run through all that. We will have more time later to read into that and get more into the details. The other thing I did want to talk about is this VR headset. It is called the Steam Frame. They define it as a streaming first virtual reality headset that can be played wirelessly, similar to the Meta Quest headsets. So what I think they mean by streaming first is the Meta Quest headsets, you can now connect wirelessly to a PC. That's actually super easy. There's actually a Steam Link app on the Meta Quest now to make that super easy. That was not actually at launch. There were ways you could do that, but it wasn't super easy to do. So what they're saying is you could have a Steam machine in your living room, it will stream the game wirelessly to the headset. So the headset itself doesn't have to have a huge amount of power built into it, because the content will be streaming from the Steam machine itself. It'll do all the processing and everything. And then you will not have to have any wires connected to it. It'll all be wireless connection. So again, one of the problems with early VR and even to the PlayStation VR 2 is that you are having to run cables, which as you start trying to play VR games can be a real headache, because people are like bumping into stuff. People are tripping over the cable. Cables are getting unplugged. You're not having to set up, the wireless lighthouses that you had to do with early VR headsets and that sort of thing. This is basically all included into the headset, much like the Meta Quest, but this will allow for more powerful things to stream directly from your gaming PC or this new Steam machine. So that seems really cool to me. It will have a USB plug-and-play 6 gigahertz wireless adapter. So this is a dedicated link for both VR and non-VR streaming. So theoretically, this would allow you to stream, potentially, I would assume, Netflix and other things like that. So if you wanted to have a private viewing experience, the sort of thing you can do on VR where, it looks like I'm looking at a 100-foot television in VR, so you could watch things like that or play non-VR sort of games on a much larger display. Yeah. Let's see. Claims it offers over a 10x improvement in image quality and effective bandwidth. It features a Snapdragon 8 series processor with 16 gigs of RAM built into the Steam Frame headset. They are going to launch a Steam Frame verified program. So much like they did with the Steam Deck, I assume the Steam machine will also have, a tick on the Steam store, so that when you are shopping for games, you'll be able to see, does this work on the Steam Deck? Does it work on the Steam machine, the Steam Frame? Yeah. All that sort of stuff. That'll probably take some redesign of Steam pages in order to get all that information where it's easily visible. This feels like an all-in-one solution. So, obviously they're selling these as 3 separate products. I would assume that the Steam machine itself will come packed with a controller, or there will be a version of it that comes packed with the controller.
Sure.
I would assume there's also going to be a version of this that comes packed with the VR frame headset as well. That would
be my assumption.
So that may be another way that they discount this, right? So, hey, this is $500, this is $300, this is, $60 on its own, but if you buy all of them together, we'll give it to you for $600-700.
Sure.
Right? Because they want you entirely in their ecosystem.
Yeah.
They don't want a chance that you're going to give Meta any money by buying the game directly through Meta.
Sure.
In that process. I will say I use the Meta Quest headset that I have. I use that to stream wirelessly from my gaming PC. To me, that works really well. That may be because of the Wi-Fi setup in my house. I could see that being problematic, but I have never had problems where it is any sort of delay enough that it's, causing me any sort of motion sickness, which is the problem you get. And that. So this being built with that in mind, I would imagine would be even an easier, better experience for that.
I would think so. I think for me, I think it's feeling so distant from the world of VR. There's a part of me that's just a little surprised that that's a battle that people are still fighting.
Yeah. I mean, when's the last time we've talked about VR other than to report on the PlayStation VR 2 failing?
Yeah.
Like, it's just not something that gets talked about much anymore. I mean, Apple put out their headset, right? And that was, that has not been successful, I don't think, by any stretch of the imagination. It seems like Apple's playing a long game of, hey, we're putting this out here. It's really almost more of a development kit than an end product. But, like when it comes to talking about VR games, we just talked about Lumines Arise has a version of that. That is not the way most people are going to play that game.
Yeah.
And so it has felt like VR has not been a going concern. This has been rumored. We've talked about it on this podcast that Steam was developing their own headset. Valve was developing their own headset, standalone headset similar to the Meta Quest. So this is that product. I don't know. I don't know if this moves the needle for VR. I mean, I guess it depends how good the headset is, how seamless of a process. Is this the way that's going to make it idiot proof for people to do VR?
Yeah.
Which really the Meta Quest kind of already is to some degree.
And I think, and I mean, maybe because my approach tends to be strictly from that of games. Like I don't tend to even be aware of like all the other
Apple
potential,
Vision Pro has no appeal to you.
All of the other potential options that there are for it. I know people from what I remember, people spoke really highly of that Half-Life VR game, Alex.
Yes.
And so, if maybe Valve is not giving up in that sense of like, we still want to go down this direction and, we're interested in how we can use this for our games in particular.
Right.
So, maybe there is that. But yeah, I think I just have such limited familiarity with all of its other uses that it feels like why are people still getting into this thing that has like we've seen how the success of it, and I feel like if we haven't hit it yet, it's never going to come. But like it's been pretty slow trudging through like VR games up to this point.
Yeah,
unless you're Beat Saber.
I think this trifecta of products, and really is 4 products when you take the Steam Deck into account with this sort of ecosystem that they're building. This is the most tenuous part of the ecosystem that you look at and you go, well, I completely get people buying the Steam Deck, and if the controller comes with it or, is at a discount when you buy it as a package or something, people will do that. I completely get that. So I think the Steam machine makes a whole lot of sense. This, I do wonder how many people are going to get on board with this that aren't already on board with it.
This to me feels like the only package option is one with all 3 of them.
Right.
Like, you can get the Steam machine and you can get the controller, but there's no way to just get those 2, right? Like, you've got to get the VR headset as well, because we want you to be compelled enough to use it.
Right. And I wonder if something like that 2 terabyte model, if that is the high end package model and that only comes with the frame packed as part of the deal. The other thing I guess I would say about this is if you get people in and they're buying games, right? So not most games, but there are a lot of games like a Lumines Arise or a Tetris Effect that have both a traditional 2D screen model as well as a VR mode included in it. And I wonder if, by them highlighting that, when people are buying it and they're like, oh man, look, like when I turn on my Steam machine, it says 35 of your games have VR mode in them, right? If that is incentive for people, like I'm not buying strictly VR games, but I am buying games that have VR as part of the package.
Yeah.
And so there's an incentive for me then to
at least check them out, maybe.
Yeah, to at least try this.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, price point on the VR for sure is going to be, I don't know what a lot of the new ones are, but I know that was something we talked about with the PlayStation VR 2 is how expensive it was.
Oh, I think, again, right? Like, it's how much of this do you want to sell? And if you really want to sell this, there's no way you price this more than the Meta Quest.
Sure. Which is $350?
I don't know because everything's changed in price recently.
That's fair, yeah.
I think at one point they had the 3S, which was like their slightly stripped down model, and it was at $300, I think.
Okay. Because I remember one of them going on sale, but that might have been the 2.
Well, I feel like they always go on sale every like Black Friday. They go on sale.
Because one of them was selling for like $199, but that might have been like an older version of it.
Yeah,
the previous generation.
Yeah, the 2 I know at some point they did sell quite cheaply like that. I think that's when my niece got one for Christmas. But like those are, like this is what VR needs to succeed. It needs somebody going like heavy and hard into it. Somebody like really throwing their support behind it. Valve has been an early supporter of VR, and so this feels like them throwing some weight around and saying, "Hey, we're doing this. We're also going to do this VR thing.
We're not giving up on this technology."
Yeah, yeah. When it feels like everybody, it feels like Sony has.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a few games every time they do a PlayStation Direct, there's a couple of games that'll be like, there'll be a little icon over in the corner, VR mode, right? But like they're not talking about it.
Yeah, they did the Horizon dedicated VR game, but
that was at launch. That was a pack-in.
Yeah, I don't remember how many. It doesn't feel like we see very many dedicated VR games.
No, not from Sony. Like I feel like they've completely given up on that.
Because I don't remember. There might have been some, like I said, some VR modes in the whatever they call them, State of Play yesterday, but not that I remember standing out at least.
No, they don't draw attention to it anymore. It's pretty clear they've given up on it. And it feels like in a lot of ways that Meta has given up on VR to some degree. Like it seems like their attention has turned more to, AI. That's where their money and their interest is focused. The Meta and Metaverse and everything they seem to have lost interest in large part. This, just kind of wrap up this discussion of this. And I feel like this is big, huge news. This feels like a potential shift in the industry. The Steam Deck was a big deal, but the Steam Deck always felt like a sort of experiment, and it was for a very specific type of player who would buy a Steam Deck. This feels like them going more directly at, hey, we want to have this thing in Best Buy next Christmas, right? We want Walmart to carry this next Christmas. And, then you start to see the parent who walks into a Best Buy and they have that package with all 3 components of this, including the VR headset, and says, oh, cool, it comes with a VR headset too? And it's only X more dollars? Sure, I'll buy that.
Sure.
The deluxe set, right?
Yeah.
This is like when you bought your NES and it came with Rob the Robot.
Just exactly the same.
Hopefully not as disappointing as Rob the Robot, which only ever had 2 games for it. Hopefully this VR already has more games, already has more value to it. So we'll see. Okay, prior to this, our big news was PlayStation State of Play, their Japanese State of Play that they held yesterday. man, if you're Sony, you gotta be annoyed that they really cut your legs out from under you. You thought you probably had at least 2 or 3 days to have the spotlight to yourself. So they had this event. This was focused on Japanese developed games and everything. We're not going to talk about this too much. There are some kind of interesting things. A lot of games that are already out on Steam that they were announcing, hey, this is also coming to PlayStation. So we'll run through some of these. As always, there were an abundance of anime games that I have no idea what it is or who is buying these games, but obviously somebody is. So one of the neat things they had was a game called Incombini.
Yeah.
One Store Mini Stories, which is a convenience store simulator. So if you've seen like Supermarket Simulator and a lot of these style of games, there's that trading card game simulator.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, I bought that game and everything and played some of that. This looks similar to that, to those style of games, but from a very Japanese perspective. It has that sort of anime styled look to it and everything.
It looks like there's a more established protagonist as well.
There's a story to it,
yeah,
right? Yeah. It looked like there was more of an ongoing story as you played through this.
As compared to those traditional simulators that feel like a complete blank slate.
Right. Very open-ended.
Yeah.
Like just, maybe there's some things to achieve, but not necessarily a narrative to it. So that looked cool. And it's always interesting to see those simulator games have been a very Western development. I feel like mostly out of Europe and the US.
Sure.
It's very interesting to see Japan take what is a very Western genre and give their spin on it.
Yeah.
Which is what this feels like to me. Maybe somebody would say that's not at all what this is, but that's the way it looks from what they showed. I have never heard of the Broken Lore games.
I had not either, but they presented them as though I should have known about them.
Right. They presented this like it was, Resident Evil or something. Like you knew this franchise. Anyways, this is apparently a series of horror games. They announced Unfollow and Ascend, both coming out soon for the PlayStation 5. These look interesting from what they showed.
Yeah. I don't know if it was just the one, but I think the like tagline was that they tend to grapple with present day issues, like real life issues. And so, the Unfollow one felt very like horror, Black Mirror, like the worst of the worst in terms of like horror as it mixes with social media.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is my reaction looking at them from what they showed. They look like they were maybe more bite-sized games, like maybe a more $20 to $30 experience than a full $60, $70 experience.
Yeah, I was thinking something.
The fact that they're announcing 2 at the same time probably plays into that.
Something like the experience of PT rather than like the full Silent Hill type of game.
Right.
Yeah.
Like these probably aren't 20-hour experiences, maybe more 5 hours or less.
Yeah.
But they looked interesting. Like, I wish Christina were here. So,
sure.
I'm sure she has thoughts on, new horror games. Speaking of horror, they showed off Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly remake. So this had apparently been previously announced at one of the Nintendo Directs. But this was a new trailer. I had completely forgotten that they had announced this. So when I saw it, I was like, cool, they're doing a remake of that.
When I saw it, I was like, oh, cool, a new Fatal Frame. And then they showed it. I was like, oh, okay, we've seen this before.
Yeah.
Because I know the franchise. I've never played any of them, so I wouldn't be able to tell a new one from an old one.
If you don't know, these are the games where you're interacting with the world through your camera. So your camera is sort of your weapon in the game.
It looked cool, though.
It looks really good.
Yeah.
It looks like a really well done remake
Yeah.
of that. So this is not one of those half-hearted remakes. It looks like they spent the money and time on it. Let's see. They announced the Gran Turismo 7 Pyre Pack DLC. They're a little vague on what exactly this DLC all encompasses. They said it's for the sort of hardcore, super into realistic racing players. And the one thing that they mentioned specifically out of it is that it would have 24-hour races as part of this. So like your 24 hours of Le Mans. I don't know that race specifically. They didn't mention it, so I'm guessing not that race specifically.
Sure.
But that it would have those sorts of races. I also don't know how is that going to function in a video game, because you cannot make somebody play 24 hours of a game in real time. People will die. Yeah. So I would imagine this is like maybe something where you can save and like come back and play it later. They're just saying it will be a full 24-hour race.
That, or like Le Mans, you have there's like teams, right? Yeah.
Even that, though, I feel like, if this is an online experience that you're switching out players, I feel like what is the audience for that? Is such a tiny audience who's actually going to do that. But it's cool to see them putting out new DLC. They do have that Spec 3 free DLC upgrade that's coming later this year. So this will come out alongside that. The way they talked about this, though they did not announce a price, this would be paid DLC for the most hardcore players. Let's see. They showed off a game called Motion Wreck. So this was a platformer that had you recording motions and then replaying them later in the level as you were going through. You said that this is already out on Steam.
Yeah. I've got a buddy who'd play this, and he really liked it a lot. It's a cool little puzzle platformer.
Yeah. Look neat.
Yeah, so like you can record, essentially you record a particular movement in the game, and then as you move around the world, you can then play that as a way to get across longer gaps. And
it looked like Celeste in that.
Yeah.
So instead of hitting the little points where you get a second jump or something, instead you have this recorded motion you can play out.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I watched him play a little bit of it. It looks pretty cool. And like I said, he seems to really enjoy it.
Maybe a little bit more puzzle focused than Celeste.
I think that's definitely fair.
Yeah. But that was one of the games that kind of jumped out to me. I was not familiar with it from Steam already. They announced that Pac-Man World 2 Repack is getting Sonic the Hedgehog DLC. I feel like they had already announced this or mentioned it, but this was the first time we saw it, and it just looks like a full 3D Sonic level that you're playing through.
Yeah.
Which is cool. I guess it's kind of a weird thing for a Pac-Man game, but Pac-Man is at one point wearing a Sonic costume, like running through it, and they had you battling Robotnik in a like end level boss stage.
Yeah, so much so that when I saw it, I was like, wait, is this Pac-Man getting Sonic DLC or Sonic getting Pac-Man DLC?
Right. Yes, it is very confusing in that way to look at it. But it looks cool. Of course, Pac-Man's coming to Crossworlds. It was already in Crossworlds.
Yes. Well, I don't know if he's already in, but that is definitely a combo or a crossover for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those DLC characters as part of that. So this is the other end of that deal, I suppose. It looks cool. Like it, like those Pac-Man World games are fairly well liked. So it's cool to see in remaking those that they're adding additional content.
Yeah.
Let's see. Nevergrave, The Witch and the Curse. This is a game where you are playing as a little cute witch, and at first this looks very much like a Metroidvania, and then about like 3/4 of the way through the trailer, they show you selecting like an upgrade that just pops up in the middle of the screen and looks like it's straight out of Vampire Survivors or something. And it was at that point where I was like, wait, is this a Metroidvania or is this a roguelike?
Yeah, I know at one point the developer said something about it being a roguelike, and that's where I was like, oh, that's not what I was expecting this game to be. I'm not surprised just with how popular they are, but I was definitely thinking this is more of a Metroidvania style game. And so it being a roguelike changes kind of dramatically like how I now think of it. Because then it also had sort of a base building, resource gathering part of the trailer as well.
Which makes sense. Like, you know, something like in a roguelike that you might like at the end go back to a base and like be upgrading between runs.
Yep.
Right? Rogue Legacy is the game I'm thinking of. It does something very similar.
Well, I was thinking Ball X Pit that we were just played for, you know, because there's like a cute little moment where there's like a pig and you like drop a trap door and the pig falls into like a pot and out pops all of the pork or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it looks, I'll be interested to look at this more when it eventually comes out, how it reviews and if other people are playing it.
It also showed 4-player cooperative.
Yeah.
It also showed a mechanic that looked like it was straight out of Super Mario Odyssey, where you were like throwing your hat onto other characters in the world and taking control of them in order to battle enemies.
But to be clear, this may have been a translation thing. The developer did say you are possessing these, whereas Nintendo made it very clear Mario is not possessing.
Mario does not dabble in the dark arts, but you are a witch in this game, so it's okay if you like have a covenant with Satan.
Mario does not possess the frog. It's a collaborative relationship between the two of them.
Which is just undermined by actually playing that game. And like when you, that first level where you're like in the mind of the character when you take over them, like whatever, Nintendo.
I just thought that was so funny that Nintendo made it. I want to say it was like a tweet or something. They're like, no, Mario is not possessing these creatures.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever, Nintendo. Yeah. This game just looked neat. It looked fun. You know, like I think what the actual nature of this game, is it more roguelike, more Metroidvania? Is it a Metroidvania that has roguelike qualities to it? Right? Like that leaves a lot kind of up in the air.
Yeah, I think of all the games that got shown, this is the one that was most intriguing to me, of like I would check this one out.
Yeah, it seemed like the one I was most likely to play. Speaking of games I probably will not play, they showed off that Elden Ring Night Rain, the new DLC is called the Forsaken Hollows. That looks neat. I have not played the base game, so DLC does nothing for me.
Yeah, same. I'm sure the game is probably fantastic, but I know people who have been really into it, but I don't plan on playing it anytime soon, so it didn't mean much to me as well.
Then they showed off some new hardware. There is a new Sony monitor, which underneath the monitor, it has a little hook for you to set your DualSense controller on, and it'll charge your controller. So it's setting right under the screen waiting for you. That's neat. It is a 240 hertz refresh rate if you connect it to your computer, 120 hertz refresh rate if you connect it to your PlayStation 5. They kind of showed this off with their PlayStation speakers as a part of an ecosystem where you have a gaming PC on one side and a PlayStation 5 on the other side connected to this monitor. It is a 27-inch monitor. They did not announce a price for that. That is coming sometime next year. I mean, you know, like specifically branded monitors, it's hard for me to get excited for. It looks like a good monitor. Some of the specs that they release sound good. I'm not entirely sure for who this is made for.
Sure.
You know, you can go on Amazon and buy, 100 different types of monitors. So it's kind of hard to get excited for this, but, stylish, looks nice and everything. The more interesting thing, and even more interesting now in light of the news of this new Steam machine, is they announced a PlayStation 5 digital Japanese edition, which sounds weird at first. So this is a digital version of the PlayStation 5 that will only work in the Japanese language. So you cannot buy this system and change it over to English. So not only can you not the operating system, right? The menu settings and all that will be locked to Japanese. One assumes that this will default any game that you play to Japanese, right? So when you start up a game, if there is a Japanese voice option and language option, it would automatically default to that.
Yeah, I don't know. That makes sense though.
But, this is something that Nintendo did with the Switch 2. There is a Japanese-only edition of that. And Nintendo did that so that they could sell a model in Japan at a cheaper price without the worry that people around the world would export that.
Yeah.
And buy those up from the Japanese market. And so that Switch 2 version sells at a lower price. We've talked about them raising the price of the PlayStation 5 here in the US. I believe a digital edition of the PlayStation 5 is now $500. This in Japan, when you convert the yen to American dollars, is going to be about $350. So, right, this is another one of those things. This is very much about politics. This is the tariffs on Japanese products into the U.S. How can we sell something in Japan where this will be more affordable to our customer base, but Americans aren't going to, import this into the U.S. and get it significantly cheaper or buy up all of these from Japanese consumers. So this seems like there's no other way really to look at it. This is a very concentrated effort from Japan to appeal to that Japanese market. And when you put this into play alongside this State of Play Japan Direct, right, that is kind of interesting because it seems like Sony, who has sort of disregarded the Japanese market in recent years. This seems like a very heavy-handed olive branch back to that Japanese market. Here is a State of Play fully focused on not just games made in Japan, but games that particularly have an appeal to the Japanese market. And we're announcing a piece of hardware that is going to be cheaper if you have not jumped on the PlayStation 5 bandwagon yet.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like that, it is a interesting move, but one that will probably end up working pretty well, and one that also just makes sense when you start to think about the business side of it.
So that's most of it. There's some other things, check that out. There are recaps online if you don't want to watch the full State of Play that's on YouTube. But, those were the highlights that sort of stood out. There was a new trailer for Dragon Quest VII Reimagined. That looks good, but there was no real news that came out of that trailer.
Yeah, I think it was kind of the same thing about the new Octopath as well. It was just like more...
Octopath Traveler 0.
Yeah, more information, but nothing, I think, that stood out too much.
No. Let's see. Since our last episode, Grand Theft Auto 6 has been delayed from May of next year to November 19th. This is not shocking, I think, to most people. That game seemed like once it got that first delay, it might get a second delay.
Sure.
That, however, is more interesting when you put it in concert with our next story. So Rockstar, over the past couple of weeks, has fired over 30 workers that they claim were sharing company secrets on a Discord server, and they claim showed, quote, gross incompetence. So it's what that Discord server was that becomes very interesting. And what that Discord server was a server for people wanting to unionize at Rockstar. So apparently people were sharing company secrets, but it was with other Rockstar employees where they were, I assume, kind of talking openly about how the company works and maybe pay and benefits and those sorts of things. So Rockstar is saying they fired them for sharing this information, being grossly incompetent. The employees, as well as union organizations, are saying, no, you did this because they were trying to form a union. Today, they were saying that they were going to, or maybe they have filed actually a lawsuit against Rockstar in response to this. So this story of them delaying Grand Theft Auto 6 drops a few days after that story breaks. So some in the industry have speculated, is that a way to try to push that story out of the headlines and make the headline the delay of Grand Theft Auto 6? Where if you search about Grand Theft Auto, you're going to see the delay
rather than
this lawsuit and other things. I don't know about that. That would not shock me. That seems like a very PR move of, hey, we have this delay, but we're not going to announce it until we have to announce it. Or in this case, we need to announce it to take attention away from something else. So it wouldn't shock me that that was what they were doing. I think the bigger story here, obviously, is them union busting.
Yeah.
And we have talked about it on this podcast before. Rockstar has a very negative history about their worker relations, of overworking employees and treatment of employees. So this is not shocking to hear out of Rockstar. This feels like the news you would expect to hear out of Rockstar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Let's see. The Poke Park, is it Kanto?
Kanto.
Is opening in Tokyo February 5th. This is part of the Yumuri Land amusement park there. This is the first permanent Pokemon amusement park. And amusement park is maybe taken a little loosely there. This is not an amusement park like we think of as a bunch of different rides. This is more, from what they've shown and everything, it looks like a nice little park that's landscaped and everything, and will have Pokemon things throughout it themed that you can look at and see. They do show, as part of the trailer, a stage show that you go into a theater and watch with, giant Pikachus dancing around on stage and everything. So this is not the amusement park a lot of people want to see come to Nintendo Land at Universal Parks. This feels very much like what Japan does with these sorts of properties. Like when they make a Hello Kitty park, it is much more about, to some degree, being a park than it is about rides and that kind of thing. But, this is that continuing push from Nintendo, right, of diversifying their properties.
Sure.
Moving more into that theme park area. This morning, you would have thought this was the biggest news of the game day, and now I feel like it's been completely eclipsed, but Nintendo did do a short direct where they showed off the Super Mario Galaxy movie trailer. Did you have a chance to watch this?
I did.
What is your reaction to the trailer?
It seems fine. I don't know if I don't think anything.
There were no big reveals or twists.
It was like, oh yeah, Rosalina's there. She should be.
Bowser Jr.
Jr. I thought it was cool. He's got they're sticking with the sunshine paintbrush. Right. That's kind of become just part of his character. So I liked that. But But otherwise, there was nothing more. I think if anything, what would have been most interesting was hearing who was voicing those characters.
They did announce it.
Oh, did they? I only saw the trailer, so I didn't see the direct.
So this is maybe the most interesting part to me.
Okay.
So Bowser Jr. is being voiced by Benny Safdie.
Okay.
So he is the director of the Smashing Machine, the Rock bid for an Oscar film that came out this fall. So he does act in addition to being a director. So he's doing the voice of Bowser Jr. But it's the voice of Rosalina that feels like Nintendo at this point and Universal are just intentionally antagonizing their fans. And I am completely for it this time because I feel like they're just doing it on purpose and they know exactly what the reaction is going to be, that the minds of incels all over the internet have melted down today in response to this. I have not seen this personally. I'm just assuming when they found out that Brie Larson...
As soon as you said it, like, oh, it's Brie Larson. Who else could it be?
Who do young men hate with the fury of a million suns for no good reason?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Brie Larson. Brie Larson is doing the voice.
That's really funny.
And as soon as I saw that, I just started laughing. I was like, oh, of course. Like, you did Chris Pratt for Mario as like the biggest like oddball out of nowhere, and then with this you're like, hey, that got us a lot of attention. What could we do that would get us insane attention for Rosalina, right? And let's cast Brie Larson because people will not shut up about this until the film comes out. Like they will be so furious.
Yeah, I did not see that. I only saw the trailer because that was the video that popped up.
And she doesn't speak in the trailer.
Yeah, and that's why I was like, oh, they're still leaving it to be a surprise. Nope, I guess not.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to the trailer. Like it starts off with Bowser shrunk down, and they are sort of keeping him as a pet. Yeah. Mario and Luigi. It's a little kind of weird and everything.
Yeah, it sets up at least the plot of the film. It seems like the plot is going to be Bowser Jr. comes in at some point ready to take back his dad.
Yeah. So one thing about Brie Larson playing Rosalina in this, so people who don't know, like Brie Larson at one point had a pop music career. So she's somebody who can sing, which when you start thinking from that perspective, okay, that makes a lot of sense why you cast her as Rosalina. You want somebody who can sing.
She was Envy Adams and Scott Pilgrim.
Right, yes. So, you know, there is a reason to cast her specifically over, you know, a similar actress to her.
Sure.
The other thing I thought was particularly interesting about this is, you know, the question has been, why do you jump straight to the Mario Galaxy movie? Why not do something else in between here, Mario World or something of that nature? And the thing I thought was interesting was how much they were borrowing from different Mario games.
Yeah.
So at one point we get a glimpse of the upside down pyramid from Mario Odyssey.
Yeah.
And then there's also a scene where we see a bunch of ninja from Super Mario Brothers 2. Of course, they've been in lots of Mario games over the year, but they originate in Super Mario Brothers 2, which is always interesting because Nintendo sort of ignores that game in the continuity of the Mario games. But, you know, certainly the Shy Guys and lots of the characters.
There are a ton of influential characters that come from that game.
Yeah, Pokey and a lot of those have their origin there. So I thought that was interesting to see. Oh, this is much more of a mishmash.
Yeah.
We're going to pull elements from the entire history of this franchise.
And that's where I think when I first saw it, you know, when Bowser Jr. comes in and says that, you know, here to take back my dad.
Right.
And then it jumps to, I want to say Rosalina. I think when I think about that, I was like, how do you fit those together? And then you kind of have to take a step back and like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
They're not following one game.
Right. I mean, they did that in the first movie when they have the whole Mario Kart section.
Exactly.
Right. And I think you talking about the paintbrush, right? Like, oh, okay, well, this is a reference to Mario Sunshine, right? This is something you could easily have dropped.
Yeah. And it's that nice little wink or nod of like to the fans of, we know that you probably want to see this. There's not going to be a ton else that references this unless maybe, at the end of the movie after they've saved Mushroom Kingdom again, they go to Delfino Isle or something like that. Like these little winks, these little nods that like, we are here to appease you. Don't ask for anything more than this.
Right. I mean, it's that fan service.
Yeah.
But it's good fan service, right? Like it's not, it would be weird to be, well, we're doing a straight adaptation of Mario Brothers 3. We're doing a straight adaptation of Mario World. Like one of the weird things too about this is Yoshi is not shown in this, but there was this past week, Pillsbury cookies that leaked out an image of what Yoshi looks like in the new movie. So
really?
The packaging is Mario Galaxy movie themed, and it has Yoshi and Mario on the packaging. And I mean, people made a big deal about this. It looks like Yoshi. Like there's not something weird, right? It looks like Yoshi. Like Rosalina looks more kind of interesting and different in the trailer than Yoshi does. So, I mean, I think Yoshi's going to look exactly like we expect him to look.
I think the biggest surprising thing is that like that was the real, not cliffhanger, but like, here's your little teaser at the end of the first movie was the Yoshi egg, right?
Right.
For him to not be in the trailer at all,
right,
is like, that's more interesting to me than anything else.
And especially since they already have that image on packaging.
Sure.
Right? Like the fact that leaked out right ahead of this, I was like, oh, well, certainly Yoshi is going to like maybe even just be the last thing in the trailer.
Yeah.
Right? At the very end of the trailer, Yoshi pops up and goes, Yoshi! And who's going to voice Yoshi?
I don't know.
Do they have Yoshi actually speak, or does Yoshi just say his name like a Pokemon? Is Yoshi a Pokemon because he just says Yoshi?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I don't know.
We may never know. The great questions that plague us at 2 a.m. lying in bed. Let's see. Moving on, EA has reconfirmed their commitment to releasing a Mass Effect 5. That's not really news, except it is news that they felt the need to like tell people, no, we're actually doing this game that we've already announced and said we were making. That's how much people are in doubt about Electronic Arts at the moment. Halo Infinite is ending major updates. So there will be no more major content updates to that game. That game was supposed to be their 10-year game, sort of in the style of a Destiny. It made it 4 years. So, obviously kind of underlying the fact that Halo Infinite did not perform at the level that they want it or need it for it to. Which is a shame. That's actually a good game. It just, the multiplayer did not launch in the state it needed to. That game launched, didn't launch with the Xbox Series X. It launched a year later. So I feel like everything that could go wrong for that game did go wrong. But if you've never played it, it's a good Halo entry. Marvel 1943, The Rise of Hydra, has been delayed beyond early 2026. That is that game teaming up Captain America and Black Panther during World War II.
Okay.
That's the Amy Hennig game. Amy Hennig, who did the Uncharted games. So we'll see what comes of that. The fact that they're saying beyond early 2026 makes me feel like that game probably falls to fall next year.
Yeah. And potentially later to not go up against Grand Theft Auto 6 now.
Well, that and the Wolverine game.
Oh, is that around that same time as well? Yeah, that one even more so in some ways.
Yeah. You probably, character action Marvel games.
Yeah.
Do you want them releasing against one another?
Yeah.
And I don't think either of those developers would want that. Let's see. Ghost of Yote has sold 3.3 million copies in its first month of release. In comparison, Tsushima sold 5 million copies in its first 4 months. So it is already past the halfway mark in a fourth of the time. And obviously Black Friday and Christmas coming up.
Yeah.
That seems like it is on a trajectory to outsell Tsushima at a much faster pace.
Certainly.
So that's good for that series to see, that game is doing well. That game has reviewed well. Have not played it yet, but
I haven't either.
It is good to hear very positive things about it. In less positive news for Sony, they announced a $204 million write-down related to Destiny 2. They say that sales are lower than expected. So, this is kind of basically getting back to this idea that Bungie, the acquisition of Bungie by Sony, has been pretty much a disaster for them. Obviously, they have delayed the Marathon game. Destiny 2 has sort of wrapped up its major development. They released that last big DLC, and they announced that they were moving to a smaller DLC sort of release schedule. And of course, part of the reason they acquired Bungie was for their push into games as a service, right? And
I was going to say, maybe Bungie's biggest contribution is telling them, don't release this Last of Us live service game.
Right.
Do not do this.
Right, which seemed like it was more directly to Naughty Dog, telling them, hey, like, if you release this is the next 10 years of your life.
Yeah.
And, it seemed the stories have come out about that. It seems like Naughty Dog more than even PlayStation balked at that.
Sure.
But yeah, it seems like that acquisition, and when we look at how that games as a service push from them, at one point they were said to have 24 or something games in development.
It was a massive number, and like some massive number of like dollars that were going, or like it was a percentage of like the funding stream or something, and it was high.
Right. And of course, there's been things like Concord that were huge disasters. There's been certainly Destiny has sort of ramped down. Marathon has been delayed. Fair Games has been delayed. It lost Jade Raymond as its lead developer.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I mean, our next story is probably by far its biggest success right now is Helldivers.
Oh yeah, certainly. By far.
Yeah. If they can make another Helldivers, I'm sure they'd be very happy.
I am sure at some point Sony is at their doorstep saying, "What about Helldivers 3?" Yeah. Can we like approach that? But like,
you may not have known, but those 12 live service games, all Helldivers.
Helldivers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Through Helldivers 15. Come on, boys.
Super Earth needs you.
Every year. Like clockwork. Yeah, and at that point, Helldivers just becomes a new Call of Duty, right? Like, that's not really a game as service anymore if you're releasing a new one every few years. I mean, of course, we had a story like Bungie like got moved under. They had been sort of independent under Sony. They got moved under the PlayStation Studios label earlier this year. Bungie, as we know them, seems to be, if not already, then dying in this.
Yeah.
And it seems like this is Sony recognizing that none of this has worked out how they intended it to.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it feels like they could get dissolved and just kind of absorbed by all the other sort of disparate teams that already exist.
And, it's a shame, like Bungie as a developer, right? Like they started out as an independent developer. Bungie made, obviously the Marathon games, the Myth games that were on Mac. Both of those were Mac only titles. And then of course, Microsoft acquired them when they were shopping around the first Halo game. So that's how that becomes an exclusive for the original Xbox at launch. And then over the years, they made several of those games. They wanted to do Destiny. They wanted to sort of move away from Halo. Microsoft allowed them to go independent. They were then acquired by Activision after going independent, and they did the first Destiny launch. I guess Destiny 2 was still under Activision. Then Activision let them go independent again, and then they got acquired by Sony. And so you start looking at this, go, does Bungie go independent again? Because they apparently do not play well with others.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as an affront against them. Maybe it's just like they need to be independent developers.
Yeah, just clashing visions or something like that. You know, Sony is like, this is the game we need you to make.
Right.
And Bungie's like, that's not the game we want to make.
Right.
So.
And that might be what we're seeing with Marathon, right?
Maybe.
Behind the scenes, like the game that Bungie wants to make is a very different game than the game that Sony wants them to make.
Yeah.
We don't know that.
Sure.
But that might explain a lot of the development trouble behind that game. We wish them the best. Hopefully that gets worked out in a positive manner. You mentioned Helldivers. Helldivers 2 has been announced, so 926,000 copies for Xbox in its first week of release. That is more than it sold on the PlayStation during its first week. And one of the things I like about this story is Forza Horizon sold more copies on the PlayStation 5 after it released like a year and a half later on the PlayStation 5 than it sold on the Xbox. So both Sony and Xbox, kind of getting back to our lead news story, right, are having way more success putting their games onto other platforms.
It's always the grass is always greener type of situation where the Xbox gamers are like, if only I could play the PlayStation game.
Right.
And the PlayStation gamers, if only I could play the Xbox games.
But this may also be part of that longing for the game, right? The fact that people on Xbox had a year plus to sort of build up anticipation for this game.
They saw all the videos and everybody having a great time. And so, yeah, I could definitely see that being the case.
I mean, we often talk about games releasing much later on a different platform. You lose that initial marketing push, right? So when it comes out on a PC a year and a half later, all that marketing hype has died off. And so that hurts the sales when it, comes out on a system later. But this is the sort of opposite of that.
Yeah.
That maybe that delay actually builds that excitement and everything when people can finally get their hands on it, finally see what Helldivers 2 is for themselves. They just jump at the chance.
Well, we were talking about this before the podcast as well with titles like Clair Obscur and Baldur's Gate, where there's sort of that slow trickle of people continually coming to games. Well, if you don't have that slow trickle, but it's all kind of built up at another release point, you kind of get this second major influx of people playing your game. And so, I mean, in some cases, maybe it just works out really well.
Yeah, and this seems to be an example. Certainly a new influx of players to Helldivers will help that game continue to get some support and development over a longer period of time. That does not seem like a game that was built with the modern idea of games as a service, long term.
Sure.
So, I do sort of think we will probably see a Helldivers 3 that really leans into that mentality sooner rather than later.
Sure.
And I think, Sony will very much desire that.
Yeah, I think they would green light that almost instantly.
Then probably applying some pressure to get something like
Sure.
that. Our last story here is the Game Awards. It's been announced that this year, in addition to streaming on Twitch, they will also stream on Amazon Prime Video. So if you have Amazon Prime Video, you will be able to stream that in, I I believe they were saying it's going to be in maybe 4K on Amazon Prime. So that seems cool because that gives it a more high profile location to be out there.
Yeah, and I wonder how many people who otherwise might not be as interested who might check it out as well.
Yeah, I mean, I assume they will hype that and promote it.
Yeah.
It'll be on their front page and everything as a big event. It's a live event, right? That does get a pretty huge audience.
Sure.
So, we often joke about the Game Awards because there's a lot to joke about it, but it may be, now that E3 is gone, it may be the biggest single event in the game industry each year.
Yeah.
Even more so than the Summer Games Live show.
Well, yeah, I mean, you figure all of the announcements, there's always the premieres of new stuff that's gets announced at the Game Awards.
Yeah, way more than awards.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and it probably is the biggest, high profile in terms of, prestige of a lot of those awards as well. I mean, I know every outlet,
right,
has their own, but in terms of, what gets recognized as the true game of the year,
sure,
kind of, I think, tends to be whatever wins at those awards.
Yeah, I mean, you have some stuff like the BAFTAs where they're giving out awards, and I think there's, those in the industry attach
as well.
Right.
Yeah.
I think people in the industry attach a lot of prestige to those awards, but the average gamer, I think you're right, they look to the Game Awards for that. All right, that does it for news. So our big question of the week, Mario, you came up with this one. So we talked last week about remakes and remasters. So your question was, which game would you most like to see get a remaster, and which game would you most like to see get a remake? This was your question, so I will answer first this time. That seems fair. So I'll answer the remake first. There's a lot of speculation and hype. Next year is the 40th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda, that we might get, say, an Ocarina of Time remake. That's been something that fans have wanted for a long time.
Sure.
But I think the more interesting Zelda game at this point to remake is Zelda 2 on the NES.
Yeah.
A lot of people really don't like that game. I think that game gets a bit of a bum rap in its reputation. And so I think that's the sort of game that you go back, you obviously fix the script because the script is horribly broken. That's the game where you get IM error. So I think you can go back and fix a lot of that game, make it more accessible to people now. I mean, you could do that with the original Legend of Zelda, but that game holds up still really well.
Sure.
Zelda 2, I think you could do a lot to fix the unfair negative reputation that game has.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have to radically change the game. I think that might be some people's intuition with it. But for me, it's more okay, we'll update the graphics, make the map easier for people to recognize and understand, add some more dialogue that directs the player a little more clearly about what they need to do and where they need to go. Certainly make some of the mechanics a little more streamlined. And I think that game then shines. You really allow people to understand why that game was always good.
Sure.
And not the train wreck that so many people write it off as.
Do you keep it side scrolling?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think so.
Yeah.
I think that mix of side scrolling with overhead, I think that's part of the appeal of that game.
Sure.
So I think you absolutely keep that as, an integral part of it. I would at least I mean, you could change it, but I think that changes the game too fundamentally.
Yeah. Cause I think that's how I first do you change it to more of a 3D game? And I was at that point, you might as well just make a brand new Zelda game.
Right.
Right. It's a completely different game at that point.
Yeah. So when I say remake, I mean, rebuild the game from the ground up, but not in the way that you are making an entirely different game.
Yeah.
So something less Final Fantasy VII, more Resident Evil 4.
Sure.
And, so that would be my sort of approach with it. I think you could do that to Zelda 1 as well. But again, that game still holds up incredibly well.
Yeah, that's the game where, if you don't mind, I'll jump in as
well. Sure. Go ahead.
I feel like, because I had also had Zelda games for me, I wasn't sure which one would be which, but I think for the remake, the ones that I had talked about were the DS Zelda games.
Sure.
Those were we talk about the DS a lot, but like those games are so confined to that system,
right?
Because like the stylus and like the ways that you use them were like, again, really integral to the ways that those games played. And
you have to make a copy of a map at one point. You have to close the lid of the DS in order to do it, which is an amazing mechanic in the game when you figure it out. But also, like, how do you port that to anything else?
And so those are the games that I'd love to see them be able to still have a life beyond the DS, and
be more accessible.
Yeah. And so, when I think about that, I guess when I think about the Zelda remakes, I think of how Link's Awakening so changed the aesthetic of how it looked.
Sure.
And if you were to redo Zelda 1 or something like Minish Cap, do you change that aesthetic? Or even with Zelda 2, do you change the like art style so dramatically with them as well?
I think if they redid Zelda 1, they definitely do it more in that sort of
chibi art style,
tilt shifted chibi style, because that's what all those games are emulating, right?
Yeah,
that's what Link's Awakening is emulating, the original Zelda.
Yep.
I think Zelda 2, you have to sort of go in a different direction, and maybe that's where you do something HD 2D with it. Like maybe that's the direction you take that game.
I was thinking about this the other day. I would love, and I don't know if this is just like a brand new Zelda game, I would love if they did another game in the style of Wind Waker with that cell-shaded art style.
Yeah.
And I feel like you could do Zelda 2 in that art style, and it would probably be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, the side-scrolling sections being very like, the sort of over-animated look and everything. I think absolutely. Wind Waker's still like, and that's the problem with Mimish Cap. Like, if you redo that, the look of that game is so much a part of the appeal of it.
Sure.
Right? It doesn't look like any other Zelda game, really. So I would hope if you redid that game, it would be more akin to that's when I would say you do more of a remaster. Like maybe HDify those graphics and everything so you can play it on a big screen, but we don't want that art style lost in the process. And then the other answer was for remasters, and I didn't have a specific game. I just wrote the PS2 platformers. So there's a lot of PlayStation 2 games that I feel like the Ratchet and Clank games, the God of War games,
Jack and Daxter,
the Sly Cooper. A lot of those games I don't think are playable on PS5.
I don't think so.
Some of them are through the online service.
Sure.
But a lot of those games aren't, or if they are, they haven't been upgraded in any significant way. I don't think you have to remake those games, but a remaster where you upgrade the graphics to HD, maybe fix some of the interface issues with more modernize them.
I think God of War 3 is because it got a PS4 remaster,
right? Because that was a PlayStation 3 game.
Yeah, but I don't think 1 and 2 are playable because I think those were PlayStation 3 remakes.
Right. Yeah. They did do like a remaster.
Yeah, like a
collection.
combo pack of those two. Or there's like the 5 because it included the PSP games as well.
I think that was a separate pack.
Okay.
Maybe with those. And so, it's always confusing.
Yeah.
Like, where is this game available? Which ones? They did a lot of those, I feel like, on the PlayStation 3, but maybe some of them came out on the PlayStation 4.
You might change my answer for the remaster then, now that I'm thinking about these.
Yeah, but like I feel like that whole generation, you don't have to remake.
Yeah.
You can just do remasters.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Like I want those games playable. Like those are games, if you did, God of War 1 and 2 and put that out on PlayStation 5 and PC, that's something I would buy on PC.
Sure. I think those would sell pretty well I think there would be some desire to return back to the Greek era of games. Right. Even if we recognize like maybe that's not the character of Kratos that we necessarily still want in video games, I think with the success of the Norse games, there would be some interest for people would be interested in returning to the previous ones.
Yeah, and you get the full story now available. And, with those platformers, particularly, those sorts of games aren't getting made today. We talk about like, Astrobot stands out because it is so unique in today's age. And certainly those sorts of games got even made less on PC.
Sure.
So if you could get those sorts of remasters of Jak and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank and all those and put those out so they're on PlayStation 5, they're on PC, everyone can access those games. That seems like easy money to me. And they don't need to be full remakes. You just need to spiff them up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So the original answer that I had, I think about it similarly to how they did I guess there were more remakes, but like the Nintendo did the Advance War games. I was thinking about the Golden Sun games from the Game Boy Advance.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Those feel like they kind of fit that obviously the same era, but another one where it's been enough time. I think that those games are very good, and I think those would fit on the Switch really well. I think the first one at least is playable online, on Switch Online.
Oh, okay.
But
on the GBA.
Yeah.
emulator.
But those feel like a good candidate for that remaster.
Yeah, and I think remaster is right for those because one of the things people didn't like about Advance Wars was they changed the art style in doing the remake. And those games, you don't want the art style changed. You want that classic art style. And so
same thing. You HD them so that they play better, they look better on a bigger screen. But otherwise, I think that they'd probably be just good.
Yeah.
The other answer that I started thinking about when you were talking about the God of War games would be you could just take the Metal Gear Solid collection that they put on the PS3 and just make that available on the PS5 so that people have access to 1 and 2 and Peace Walker and a lot of the older games that are only playable on PlayStation 3 at this point in time.
But they did. They put out that Metal Gear Collection Volume 1.
Oh, that's right. I completely forgot about that. Okay, that's right.
So it doesn't have some of the portable games, some of the PSP games.
That'd be Peace Walker.
Yeah, I don't think Peace Walker's on that or Acid.
Okay.
And then it doesn't have 4, which was the PlayStation 3 game, which has never been ported anywhere.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, I was going to say, I know that was also part of that collection, but that must be the only way that it's playable is on 3.
Yeah, I don't think that's never been ported to another system.
Which one is that? Is that Guns of the Patriots?
Yes.
I think. Okay.
Yeah. So the assumption is that because they called that first one Volume 1, at some point they will announce a Volume 2 that has
4 and 5 are on that one.
Right, and those portable games.
I had completely forgotten that they did that. All right, well, good. I'm sticking with my Golden Sun answer then.
I mean, that is a very good answer about Metal Gear Solid. They just already did it. Yeah. Making those games accessible on, different platforms was something that people have wanted for a long time. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the right use for remasters, right? Like making those sorts of older games accessible on new platforms, particularly PC, because that era of games we're talking about was when games weren't getting
Yeah.
cross-port it to PC.
And especially when you can release them as like a package. There's
Right.
multiple games, you know, like they did Advance Wars 1 and 2. You could do Golden Sun and Golden Sun The Lost Age
Right.
as a single game that you could sell for $60 or $70.
Right.
And I don't think people would feel too bad because they know they're getting 2 20 to 30 hour RPGs
Right.
in that collection.
Right. It feels less like I'm being taken advantage of.
Sure. As compared to maybe like Thousand Year Door, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, here's a 20-year-old game, but do I really need to spend $60 on some updated graphics?
And Sony seems more willing to do that where, you know, they put out a God of War 1 and 2 remaster. We'll price that at $40.
Sure.
As opposed to Nintendo, who puts out Galaxy 1 and 2 at $40 each. I have resisted buying those mostly because the price makes me mad.
Yeah.
Like if those had come out at $40 as a collection,
Yeah.
probably sold me day one.
You can get them $60 as a collection, right? Is it the physical that's a $60?
No,
collection?
it's 70.
Oh, is it 70? Yeah, okay.
You're saving $5 each. It's a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, sure.
All right. That does it for this week's episode. As always, thank you, Mario. Thank you to everyone listening. You can find more information by going to salukigames.com, find back episodes, articles, other things that are posted up there. As Mario noted at the top of the show, he's going to be at a conference next week. I think
Christina is too.
Yeah, I think Christina is as well. So unless I'm going to come and record an episode by myself, which would be the saddest episode ever, we are probably not going to have an episode next week. The week after that is Thanksgiving, so we will all be gone. So we will not have an episode that week either. So we are probably most likely going to be off the next 2 weeks. We'll come back. We'll have at least a couple of weeks there as last week of semester finals, as we head into Christmas break. We'll have to kind of figure out the scheduling for all of that before we take our Christmas break hiatus. And then after that, we will come back and have our Game of the Year discussion, which is always like a mammoth undertaking.
Yeah.
Because those are mammoth episodes, and we record both of them usually at the same time, the same week.
Yeah.
So we'll have to figure out all the scheduling for that. But that gives those of you listening an idea of how our at least next month or so of this podcast should go. But yes, thank you for listening. If you have questions, comments, if you have a big question suggestion, you can send all of that to justin.young@siu.edu. We always welcome any comments, suggestions, questions that you might have. And that does it for this week. So we hope that you have a very good week, a very good Thanksgiving, if this is the last chance before we talk to you. Play something fun, take care of yourself, and we'll be back soon.